Jolly good. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this Cabinet meeting. Glad to have you with us. We've got a busy agenda this evening. We'll skip through the formalities, then we're going to change the order around a little bit. We have a number of members of the public and others who've come along to join the discussion on item 16, which is the cricket ground and Moulton possibilities. So what we'll be doing is just do our quick formalities, minutes and so on. Then we'll take item 16. We'll then take item 6, which is the report from overview and scrutiny on the budget. And then as a result of that, and for further context, we'll take item 9, which is the update on the latest budget monitoring, which will then give us a fully informed view of getting into the budget items that Malcolm's going to introduce for the draft budget for the coming year. So let's start first of all. I don't think we have any apologies for absence. No. Okay, that's great. Any Cabinet member or officer wish to make a declaration of interest on any item on the agenda? No, okay, that's great. In which case we have some minutes, and these are minutes of our last meeting, which was held here on the 16th of January. All Cabinet would have had a chance to see these. Can I ask if you have any recommendations for amendments, corrections, anything of that sort? No, in which case, can I just ask you to signal your agreement to the signature of the minutes? Is that agreed? Thank you. We no particular chair's announcements, other than to say that we have a packed agenda. We have shy of an hour and a half's worth of speakers. As always, we'll ask speakers to be concise. We had due to particular circumstances where the leader of the main opposition had a death in the family. We allowed statements to be read on her behalf. That was absolutely the right thing to do. We're going to try and reduce that as being a habit, and that was proposed for this evening, and kindly got Wendy's permission to try and merge those two together with her own comments. But other than that, we'll get into the meeting. David, did I see your hand?
Yes, apologies. I do have a declaration for item 16 that my wife's great uncle was the first captain of Northamptonshire County Cricket Club, JP Kingston.
Thank you for the thoroughness of that. Yep. Brilliant. Okay, and then I have nothing. Yes, he's on the B team now, I think, isn't he? Yeah. Okay, so I have no urgent business either. So let's go over to item 16 then, if we may. Adam is going to introduce this to us, just give us some comments, highlights from the report and so on. I think there are a few comments to take just to clarify where we think we are with this. We then have a number of speakers, and we'll first of all be welcoming some public speakers. We have Mr. Samuel Gisrael, Jodie Austin, Natasha Caton, and then councillors, Councillor Beardsworth, Holland-Ellesmere and Randall. So first of all, let's go over to Adam to introduce it. Adam, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Happy to introduce this report, which proposes that the council leases land at New Manor Farm for a second site for Northamptonshire County Cricket Club. The term of the lease would be for 125 years. And the lease would be subject to the cricket club being able to raise the funds and crucially achieving planning permission for the development in question. Indicative, and I stress the word indicative, plans of which are contained within the pack tonight. Now, the planning process will involve a full consultation of local residents, and prior to that, both we and the cricket club will be engaging with residents, the parish council, the town council and other stakeholders to ensure that we have a full range of local views on what is appropriate for the local area. The heads of terms set out in the paper provide the framework within which the County Cricket Club could operate at the land in question, and I would draw members' attention to clause 18 of the heads of terms, which defines the purpose of the site as being for sporting purposes. As land set out currently in planning terms as a green wedge, a housing development, even for affordable homes, is unlikely to be permitted, whereas a low density development such as this may be approved at planning, but that's subject to all the other details being considered. The intention is that these facilities would provide a home for the County Cricket Club's charitable foundation, a regional hub for women's and girls cricket, a regional hub for disability cricket, a world-class cricket academy venue, a venue for youth and pathway cricket at all age groups, a venue for recreational cricket and community initiatives, and a high-quality playing area capable of staging county first and second team cricket. However, I must stress that this is all while keeping first-class men's cricket at Wantage Road, where it's been played since the 19th century. Both the Cricket Club and ourselves adamant that the home of Northamptonshire County Cricket Club is Wantage Road, and I think it's a sign of the Cricket Club's commitment to maintaining at their current home that they've recently undergone renovations to the tune of £1 million or so, and bringing their facilities up to scratch for the game in the modern age. So with that, Chairman, I'm happy to turn to comments and questions.
Okay, thank you, Alan. That's very helpful. I think, Mike, you're looking across. I think you have some comments to make, don't you?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. As a member representing the Malton Lees area, several residents have contacted me over the past few days. And indeed, I've met several and organised a Teams call earlier today with some of them as well. From the conversations I've had, I think it's important that I relay what those residents' concerns are. And I know that we're going to hear from some as well. But I think that can be summarised in 3 areas. And if it's okay, I'll ask some questions that they've asked me to ask, which can perhaps be answered in turn. To summarise those areas, it's concerns over the capacity, the consultation and the role that they might have in shaping future proposals, and what happens if the cricket club doesn't raise the money or the necessary funds, what happens in that instance. So if we go with each question in turn, and then perhaps officers and or Councillor Brown can answer them. The first one, over capacity. The cricket club have some really high profile artists that play at their current facility in Wantage Road. Indeed, I've paid my ticket price to attend some in the past too. So I think the concerns around capacity are not only the obvious ones over the impact that it would have and the traffic and all of those obvious sort of things, but it's also in terms of noise. So can you please clarify for them what's in tonight's proposal in terms of capacity? Is this part of the proposal that we're voting on tonight, or is it part of a separate process? And will concerts similar to the ones organised at Wantage Road be allowed at the current venue? Perhaps you can answer that one first, and then take the next one.
Yeah, if you wish to. Yeah, and I don't know whether Adam, do you want to come in on that, or Stuart? Let's go to Adam first. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, so any questions around capacity would be handled through the planning regime and the licensing regime, where if and when the club applies for an operator's license for a stadium, in inverted commas.
Okay, brilliant.
And in terms of consultation, any planning application would involve a statutory consultation process. But as I said before, both we and Northamptonshire County Cricket Club have undertaken to carry out an even further wide-ranging consultation of all key stakeholders, including the public and Northampton Town Council and Malton Parish Council.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Adam. You wanted to add something, Stuart, perhaps?
Yeah,
Director.
Thank you, Chair. And again, absolutely understand the concerns of the residents as set out. And just to be clear that the heads of terms is very precise in terms of what the uses would be permitted and the purpose of the land that we've identified in this particular land deal. So within the report, there is a copy of the heads of terms. Section 18 looks at purpose, and the use is very much around, is about primarily cricket, and secondary to that, other sporting activities such as training, ancillary there too, looking at, as was identified by Councillor Brown, the better participation of cricket as we go forward. So that is the focus, that is the uses. And as we go through the heads of terms, it also identified what isn't allowed, and basically that says everything else is not allowed other than cricket, and then ancillary uses towards cricket and other sporting organisations. So not only do they have to go through the planning regime, but to look at things like capacity, etc. But it's also in the lease that other issues such as concerts or other commercial activities cannot take place on the land. And just to be clear, that all conversations we've had with the cricket club has been around the permanent development and what that would look like. And that's where the 2,000 seats that we've talked about and referenced are included in this paper. I do know that the club does have an ambition that through women's sport that there is a chance that they would hold test matches in the distant future. But that's something that, as Councillor Brown has identified, would be looked at on its merits at the time, if indeed that ambition actually comes to fruition. So the opportunity we are currently looking at is for a capacity of 2,500 seats at this time. Again, subject to planning and funding being in place.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. That was helpful. Mike, I think you flushed a few issues out, haven't you? Should we keep going, see if we get these answered?
We'll keep going to keep the time up, if that's okay, Leader. So for me, where this has gone wrong, and I've been heavily involved in responding to people over the weekend, it is in what the public perceive this to be, and the frightening thoughts of in their heads what it could be. And actually, when you listen to the detail, it's absolutely what it isn't. So where it's gone wrong is in the involving local people at the earliest opportunity. But I do see an opportunity now to involve them from now on. And I appreciate Councillor Brown saying it should be a consultation. It absolutely should be, but I think we need to go a little stage further and a little bit quicker on that. So I think what we need to do is immediately, if this was to be approved tonight, immediately get a session involved so the cricket club could go through those plans in detail with local residents, Malton Parish Council, Malton Leeds Residents Association, and actually shape this. Because in the meetings and chats that I've had, residents have come up with some good ideas that actually I think the cricket club might like and appreciate as well in shaping this process. So can we guarantee that we'll enable them to shape this process? The one thing that residents are absolutely adamant on and asked me to express this tonight is that they absolutely would prefer an appropriately sized cricketing facility there, as opposed to another large-scale housing development on the outskirts of Malton. So can we guarantee that, if this does go through tonight, we will quickly get the cricket club to organise with those interested parties and get the message out there as to exactly what this is? That's my second question.
Yeah, okay, let's pause there. Adam, you going to comment?
Yeah, prior to the meeting tonight, the cricket club gave an indication that they'd be willing to do just such an event. So we have their commitment already.
Okay, thanks,
Excellent.
Mike.
And then third and final question from me before we hear from members of the public. If the cricket club weren't to raise the money, it's not the easiest exercise going out there to raise money. What happens in that instance to the site? And would any future decisions have to come back to the appropriate body if the club doesn't raise the funds?
Thanks, Mike. Adam, again, are you going to jump in on that one?
The heads of terms are very clear. If the cricket club can't obtain the funding to deliver the facility defined under the heads of terms, then the land reverts back to the control of West Northamptonshire Council.
Okay, thank you. I might have some more comments after we've heard the members of the public and others speak, Leader, but that's it from me for now. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That was helpful. I think you brought up things that are important to us, but obviously many things have been raised by residents as well. There was one other thing that I don't think we'd realised, that there's a sort of charity organisation, a farm, very well respected, Solhaven, who operate there. I think we didn't know because there was no sublease formally in place, but now we do know that there will be a proper lease put in place to ensure that the continuation. Is that a slightly different area or in the same area? Stuart, do you know?
It's certainly within the land that's identified, but again, I think we identified this a number of months ago, and we've clarified that the land doesn't impact on any of the development that we're currently looking at. In fact, it can be seen as a good neighbour in many respects. So that future of that particular site is not at risk as part of this. And again, we'll be discussing formalizing any lease or future activity on that land as we go forward. But as you said, a very welcome business within the community.
Leader, very last comment from me on that point. That's exactly the type of idea that local residents have suggested or said, that this is a type of organisation that can add value and should be introduced and spoken with the cricket club and all that type of thing. So that's the type of ideas that residents can help shape this on.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Okay, well, we covered some extra ground there, which I think was really, really helpful. Shall we now move to our speakers? We've got three. The first one is Mr. Yisrael. Is it Samuel? And if you would, sorry, I should explain this. Come to the front there. You see the microphone there. Make yourself very comfortable at the table. And there's a little button in the middle. If you press that button, the light goes red and you'll be live. Thank you, Ian. That's really kind of you. Welcome.
Is that okay? So I'd just like to inform, I'm actually live on New Manor Farm. I'm one of the founders of Solhaven. You know, we set up Solhaven as a community interest company, which we did speak to the people from the council in regards to the mental health teams, and we've talked to various people who've come from the council to view the site since we've been there. So it's not like the council didn't know that we were there, because we actually get referrals from the council to the projects that and the work that we provide. Our concerns is the impact that this has on the local environment, because of there's plans that shows a cut through road that's going to come through from Moulton Industrial Park through the potential where the Pocket Park is, and then across the field. So you're going to be losing local wildlife, local green area, and it's going to have a huge impact on the environment. Sorry, I'm not timing how long I'm speaking for.
Don't worry too much. Please continue.
Okay, and and also the the impact of suddenly seeing such a development on the doorstep of people. The people that we are working with are very vulnerable, and there's lots of people who are very concerned and very upset, because the drawings do show the site of 12,000 stadium in the paperwork, and that's just very upsetting to people to kind of feel that the Greenfield site is going to just disappear, and it's now going to be faced with a big load of works and all that traffic coming to the area. Concerns about on the Balton Road, where it showed that fatalities have happened in that area, and the traffic lights potentially would be right where there's a dip in the road, and you'd be coming right up to the traffic lights. And that's a great concern of people in the neighbourhood.
Okay, thank you, and it's nice to meet you. It sounds like an excellent project you got,
Thank you.
and I get your main point there about a quiet corner suddenly becoming a noisy corner. I think that's the key point. Is there any of the other points that have been raised at this stage that we're in a position to comment on? Do we think, or do we have to say we register them, we get them, and sorry, Stuart, please. No, happy to do that. Yeah, happy to do that.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed for your comments. So if we go to our next speaker, which is Jodie Austin. The microphone's still on, so as long as you're fairly near to it, we'll hear you.
Thank you. I've written mine down, so I remember everything. Okay, so Moulton's a wonderful community, and we've got a really good sense of belonging and support for each other. However, the growth and development in recent years has come as some shock to people in the spaces and places around. We live on Harvey Lane, which backs directly onto the planned site. On Thursday, a neighbour asked us if we had seen the proposals for the cricket club. We felt surprised that we had not been notified. We felt blindsided. We would expect in a similar way, if a proposal for an extension at a neighbour's property were being drafted, we would be notified and communicated with. Nevertheless, the communication has arrived by a worried neighbour having read a media article. In reading the article, the summertime image of a local community club is illustrated. However, once we researched the documents for this meeting, having followed the clues left by the Chronicle and Echo, my husband, who reads construction drawings, was able to illustrate the scale of this corporate stadium that's being proposed. The current county ground is 6,500 seats. This is a 12,500 stadium for women's and disability cricket, which does not have this level of following. Sixfields Stadium is 8,000, Franklin's Gardens is 15,000. If this proposal is about community and grassroots cricket, why were the community not offered to lease the land? As a lecturer in community development at the University of Northampton and a director of a charitable community development organisation, I know well the challenges faced by the community and leaders such as yourselves in the local authority. Introducing a facility of this scale in a stable community will cause catastrophic stress to a community and infrastructure. Little support and facilitation has been brought in to manage current change caused by developments. Having had conversations with neighbours, our concerns are as follows. The community shock of such a significant development within a village will further deepen the divides in our community. For example, Malton Magpies used to be a village green with a playground of football pitches for local games. It was open access where local children were allowed to play. Now this club has been developed by a professional entity and it has also been extended further. All its premises are fenced off and it's grown massively in size. It's become a problem for the local streets and neighbourhood due to the congestions, especially at weekdays and weekends and match days. Cars overtaking the streets with parking, traffic and inconsiderate behaviour of visitors, littering and noise. And that provision sits directly next to the proposed site. There's no policing of any visitors either and no respect for the neighbourhood. If this proposal goes ahead, the pedestrian access onto Fuller Road will draw traffic and park cars onto our streets. This will inevitably cause congestion when 7,500 people who've not been catered for in the proposed 1,000 space car park as using the residential streets and pedestrian access. Stadiums open opportunities for income, and we've seen it through Delabury Abbey, Franklin's Gardens and the Wantage Road site. Having previously lived in these areas, the unpredictable behaviour of intoxicated adults can cause distress to communities, particularly the ageing community around Fuller Road. Our residential streets are frequented on a daily basis by carers and ambulances, and we are a community that look after each other generationally. We're concerned that this development will bring the unfamiliar and unpredictable situations that our community has not been prepared for. Please think of your neighbourhood where you live. Would you and your elderly neighbours cope with 12,500 seat stadium in your back garden? Community involvement, as you know, in your roles is the bedrock of safer, stronger communities. Malton fully backs WNC's strategic plan for healthy, sustainable, climate change, resilient places and spaces. We want community facilities that support the development and growth of well-connected, self-sustaining communities. However, this cannot be achieved without community support. Our plea is to have open, transparent and measured dialogue with our community. Being blindsided or persuaded by inaccurate images or figures can leave people stressed and feeling overwhelmed in their own homes. A lack of being heard or sense of significance is not what we've built our community in Malton on. So we plead that you act to your principles and values as a democratic authority with open spaces and meetings and points of communication by bringing the community into the decision-making process. Sorry, I know it's quite a long speech.
No, it's tremendously. Thank you, tremendously helpful. Thank you for your points. Let's take our last public speaker, which is Natasha Caton. Welcome.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Natasha. I'm also part founder of
Sorry, can
Solhaven.
I just ask you, move a little near, lovely.
Is
That's
that better?
better.
Yeah. So I'm one of the other founders at Solhaven. We moved to Northampton, Malton in 2015 with a dream to help others with their mental health on all levels. And this is what Solhaven has become. But now to think about Solhaven with not one, but 2 stadiums, according to the plan, 12,500 people descending on our doorstep with overflowed car parks, overflowed pathways, and not having the serene of green space right on our doorstep struggles with people with mental health. One of our staff members found out about this through social media on Wednesday, And I had a very anxious phone call from him on the Thursday saying, I'm not secure. My mental health has gone downhill. I need help. And this is after a person that has been okay with his mental health for the last 3 years. My objections are all around health and well-being towards the plans that are moving forward. All the environmental efforts have consequences to the community's health and well-being. The loss of green fields and the loss of pocket parks will discourage users within communities to walk to access outside public spaces. Plenty of studies indicate the well-being benefits of being outdoors, but sadly, there will be less. Outdoors will help physically as well as the mental health. Spending time in natural light improves the mood, reduces stress and depression. Vitamin D levels go up. Your self-esteem levels improve as all your 5 senses are stimulated in a way they are not indoors. People just feel better for being outdoors. But have we considered the light pollution? Now, we currently live next door to the football ground, and we notice a difference personally every time the floodlights already go on. Are there floodlights in the plan? Negative impacts of light pollution with one's environment or close neighborhood include suppression of hormones. Melatonin has antioxidant properties. It induces sleep, boosts the immune system, lowers cholesterol, and helps the functioning of the pancreas, the thyroid, and so much more. Disruption to this rhythm can cause sleeping disorders, mood and mental health disorders, obesity, cancer, heart disease, and even difficulties with fertility. And these will not only be on the human population, but the nature population as well. And we haven't covered the environment with the foxes and the bats, and the sheep and the cows and the wildlife and the flowers. And what will that do? Have we covered the flooding? Because we get flooded. Our polytunnel has had this much water in it this week, but does the planning of the lease actually think about the flooding that's going to happen heading towards the village? Noise pollution. The most common health problem it causes is hearing loss. Exposure to loud noises, and loud noises could mean machinery as it's being developed. It could be the drums and the whistles and everything else and the crowds cheering. It could be noise pollution through coaches. Because on this map, it says there's coach parking. It causes loud noises, or exposure to loud noises can cause high blood pressure, heart disease, sleeping disturbances, and stress. These health problems can affect all ages, especially children and the elderly. As there is an already ever-expanding football club within less than half a mile of this proposed development, residents living between the 2 major sport facilities will be surrounded by noise from 2 different sources. Air pollution. With the proposal of around an additional 1,000 vehicles entering a very small, cramped and overbuilt community, particulate matter in the air, which will be of much higher concentrate. It is well documented that even a short-term exposure can lead to a wide range of diseases over and above respiratory problems. Children, in particular, are vulnerable. Even as they walk to school down the high street, they're still exposed to it. The neighbourhood where this development is planned houses hundreds of elderly people as well as young people in and around Fuller Road. And to not bring any emotion to the table is hard, so please forgive me. No, we get people from social subscribing, GPs, Solhaven, and you say yes, Solhaven and that area of the CIC is safe, but all of a sudden we have all the light pollution, air pollution and everything else. We have people literally walking past our front door for foot access to both stadiums. And at the moment, it's quiet, it's peaceful, and it's a safe haven for so many people who are struggling along the way. And it's a safe place at the moment. But what happens if one of our neighbours needs an ambulance on game day? If you were to measure the road from the top of Northampton Lane North and to the bottom of Northampton Lane South, bumper to bumper, that's 350 cars. What happens if we need an ambulance, or somebody in Ryland Road or Fallers Road needs an ambulance? What happens if there's an ambulance or fire or police that's needed in the schools or in the centre of the village? We've got roadworks at the moment going through Northampton Lane North and South. We have to allocate an extra 25 minutes to get to our destinations in the morning because of roadworks. So how does this help the community? I leave you there. Would you like to have all of that foot through your front garden, your front door, or your back door? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to all three speakers there for comments. We've got three council speakers to come in, but I wonder, do we pause there and perhaps try and make any comments that we want to on these points so far? Would you like to take the opportunity, Stuart, pick up it, or Stuart, over to you? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I think what we've heard there is the need to, as has already been described, to get into the community, to understand what this proposal actually is and the benefits of what it can provide to the general public. Absolutely understands the comments put forward. Equally, there is other opportunities around this in terms of how sport can benefit or people can benefit from sport as we go forward. And we've seen that time and time again. The proposal as is a principle of a land deal going forward, which is always subject to planning going forward. And that planning is there to look at the environment and the environmental impact as we go forward. Any planning application that is received today would require biodiversity net gain. So the developer would have to demonstrate that actually they're leaving a positive benefit in terms of the environment as we're going forward. Can they do that? Well, that's what the process is about. In terms of light pollution, noise pollution, and indeed traffic, again, that's what the planning process is there to do, is to look at what the proposal is, the number of vehicles that will use the site, looking at the parking, etc. And again, if you can't mitigate against that, well, the planning permission won't succeed. So these are all tests that will be put forward as the security, if you like, that all of the issues that have been mentioned in terms of impact on the development, on the community, on the neighbours around that are considered, looked into, and a decision made as part of that planning process. So it's correct that some of these issues haven't been looked at in the detail that need to be, because we always knew that the planning process would follow, and that is the correct process to investigate these things. So with bringing in the likes of Natural England and etc. and people like that who are passionate about the environment, as indeed we are. So it's all about the consultation in my eyes, and making sure that as soon as whichever decision is made tonight, that we follow that up with a full consultation and a full communication strategy with the residents, with the community, with the stakeholder in that area to set clear what this is. So again, we've heard tonight about the numbers of people that will attend or may attend, etc. I think it's for the cricket club really to set out what that vision is and how that could work. And as has been mentioned before, working with residents, working with parish council, working with stakeholders, us see how that moves forward into that planning process. So most of the issues that have been raised tonight will be looked at and resolved subject to the decision tonight as part of that process. Yeah, so I think that's the overall sort of principle of the issue.
Yeah, Adam, did you want to add some comments there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Mrs. Austin mentioned the need for an open, transparent and measured dialogue, and absolutely concur with that. But it's worth stressing once again that what tonight is not is a planning committee hearing. And so we're not approving the plans in the papers. We're simply considering whether to grant the land deal to the cricket club that would then allow them to go forth and seek funding and then seek planning permission thereafter, at which point they would have to answer every single one of the questions that members of the public have posed here tonight. So yeah, I think that's where we are here tonight. But it is abundantly clear that the consultation, the engagement with the public and the local community needs to be spot on from this moment forth, and we'll certainly, if these proposals are approved tonight, we shall do just that.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. I think, sorry, Mike.
Leader, just to come back to the point really around there's clear that there's going to be a planning consultation and a process that follows that. But it seems to me logical that actually, again, we could use some of that expertise that we've heard from the charity tonight to help shape that process. We've got a charity here that sounds like it's doing excellent work with mental health. Now, I know from my own experience, not with cricket, but my own experience going to the gym, what a benefit that can have on my mental health. And we all know, I think, and understand that sport and physical activity has a benefit. So to me, it's logical, and I would really encourage the cricket club guys that are here to have a conversation. Let's get them around the table with Solhaven, because I think they can add value. I think they can add value to each other here. So I'd really encourage conversations to start. And if this is approved, I'm sure they can start immediately after this meeting in the foyer.
Yes, absolutely. With perhaps facilitators, with three gentlemen here from the parish council who might have the opportunity to facilitate that, public spaces and so on, to organise public meeting or something. Fiona.
Thank you, Chairman. Like the Chairman said earlier, and I do apologise for the people at Solhaven, that in my capacity, I should have known about you and I didn't. But we do value very much the work that all of our charities do for those suffering with mental health issues in our district. But as Councillor Hallam said, we do know that there could be a compromise, because we do know, even though I know nothing about cricket, I know that sport, outdoor activities helps a lot of people with their mental health. So I would be looking towards our planning application to actually look into that side of it as well. So that would be what I would be watching out for. Thank you.
Yes, I'd agree with that. Many of us appreciate the value of outdoors and exercise and so many other things. I agree with everything there that Natasha Caton said, particularly at the end there. And I think on the point that Mrs. Austin made, the consultation, you're right about neighbours extension, but only when they apply for planning. This is nowhere near a planning application, and nor should it be near a planning application. But there's a series of events that have to fall into place, one of which is the cricket club seeking from various sporting bodies funding. They can't possibly start seeking that without knowing that there is a piece of land that the landowner may be interested in offering to them. We weren't prepared to take our discussions any further without publicly making a decision, which we should do, to illustrate that this might happen. So as a consequence to that, I think before it goes anywhere near a planning application, it's clearly right to have a lot of public consultation. Public consultation will then support funding applications, and so it goes on. So there's a chicken and egg here, but this is the right order. I think that we're taking things in there. I can see Mrs. Austin signalling. Did you want to just make a quick point, Mrs. Austin? Happy to comment. I think part of the answer is the cricket club have had aspirations for some time to really put Northants cricket on the map in a number of different ways, one of which is through what they want to do with the disabled game and the women's game. So I previously, my time at Northampton Borough, we had conversations. We were unable to settle on a suitable site. This is one that we have. At one time, I feared that other towns may find a more attractive opportunity for the cricket club. We might find Northants cricket moving to Milton Keynes, and that was a horrifying thought. So we have looked at a number of different sites. We entertain ideas that come forward from all sorts of organisations in whatever form they come. So we have a policy for smaller clubs, charitable buildings. We have a bunch of buildings that the council, the taxpayer owns. We have an application process that says if you can illustrate the positive impact, you may be able to successfully bid for a cheap building that's owned by the council and so on. So we're open to those points. Is there anything you wanted to add? You do a lot of work with the other clubs and other sports, Adam, but perhaps have I answered the question, or is there anything you wanted? I've answered the question. Yeah. Fair, Stuart? Yeah. Okay. There might be other points that are flushed out now by our three councillor speakers. So shall we ask them to come forward? The first of those this evening is Councillor Sally Beardsworth. Sally, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Can everybody hear me all right? Okay.
We've got
I just wish sometimes we'd learn a little bit better about how to handle the general public. We always seem to be landing them with things like this without prior consultation. And I think it's our gift to actually not say as hares running. It's us to tell people the truth when we're going to do something, how it's going to affect them and how they can be involved. It's the old question of doing things with people rather than to people. And I think we need to be wiser on that score. And I appreciate it's early days, but the media has picked it up, and obviously this has caused problems. People are very worried. They don't know what's happening and they are concerned. We could prevent it all that by doing something before the papers came out to let the people of Malton know what was happening. Now, I'm not against cricket. I'm very much for it. I think it's a wonderful sport, but I do wonder about the size of the stadium where 12,000 is quite large. I think it's bigger than Wantage Road. And I just wonder how many disabled and girl cricketers will be using it. I think it needs a real good look at before we take this any further to make sure that we're not dooming it for failure. So I think we shouldn't be having a huge stadium built. Goodness me, haven't we had enough of stadiums being built in this town already? And we really need to make sure that people understand what we're doing and that we will be doing it with them, not to them, and actually to encourage people to get involved from the community to put their minds at rest. And as for the charity that's working there, we should be supporting it wholeheartedly. I'm sure we do. But I think we need to take them on board sooner than anybody to make sure that people don't suffer more mental health with the problem this has got. So please, all I'm asking you for is better communication, sooner communication, and actually to make sure that the people of Malton get the answers they deserve before anything happens. Thank you.
Okay, I think I might respond there. Thank you, Sally. A little bit of political jibing in there, I thought. In practice, this council has an excellent track record for consultations. You look at the many consultations that are ongoing. We launched a year or two back a thing called The Big Conversation, which almost said to people, what do you actually want to talk about? They set the priorities and we listen carefully. Our track record on partnership is way ahead of many councils. When we write a policy, we write it with the business community, the voluntary sector, or whoever else is involved in a particular area. So I think the consultation is good. The first time you hear about anything like this, might be a surprise and might be a concern. And our natural behavior for anything that happens in our neighborhood is naturally one of concern. And by the way, I've had some really genuine, well-founded concerns this evening. I'm not trying to dismiss any of that. I completely understand that. They all need to be discussed. But the first time you hear it, it'll be a shock. Whether you hear it through a neighbor, whether you hear it through social media, whether you first get the planning letter, my thought would be if we hadn't told people about this until it was all the way through into the planning system, that would be a big mistake. We're flagging up early. Our absolute determination is it should be consulted. We're urging the cricket club to do this. I sense that this is a community project for which they'd love to do that, and they want that kind of support. But we have listened carefully to all of these things. The backstop will also be the planning system. The backstop will also be the fact that any lease will be with this council. So even if an application comes forward that couldn't be refused on planning grounds, if we had concerns, it could be controlled within the lease that the council will write. So there are so many safeguards and backstops and so on. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to those sort of comments, Adam?
Yeah, just to come back on Councillor Beardsworth's use of the 12,000 figure. I appreciate that in the indicative drawings, it shows space for temporary stands that may eventually take the capacity up to such a level. However, it's important to note on pages 520 and 521 of the report pack, the slides from the cricket club, that the only capacity that the cricket club are pursuing at this stage is a single stand for 2,000 spectators. That's stated twice explicitly by the cricket club in their overview of the phase development, a stand for 2,000 spectators. So I think what I quite understand where the higher figure has come from. It's also clear in the cricket club's presentation that they're not seeking any higher capacity at this stage.
Brilliant. Thanks, Adam. Let's move on to our next speaker, which is Councillor Holland-Delamere. Keith, over to you and welcome.
So, yeah, it does make interesting reading. I think basically, I definitely agree with a lot of the comments that have been made in terms of transparency and clarity. Sometimes we do need to restate that this is not at the planning stage. Basically, it's not at the planning stage. It also illustrates to me that the fact that we've had a problem with the fact that someone's been using the land for a long time and asset management aren't properly aware of what's going on our own land. Again, it's another illustration of how we continue to need to get our asset management in ship shape to make sure that we don't have egg on our face in terms of knowing what is actually going on with our assets. I think I would definitely agree with Councillor Hallam that going forward, we do need to make sure that we reach out to all the various partners and residents around the area prior to the planning application, so that we really make sure that that the cricket club is taking the community with them, basically. That's my only comments, and there's another speaker.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Keith. I think you're right. Stuart, just to clarify, what are you able, or perhaps you'll have a think about it and take after our next speaker, in terms of the lease arrangements and so on, perhaps just reflect on that and chip in. Keith's point is pointing at us. Were we unaware of there being another lease arrangement, or is it right to say that if something goes ahead and we come to a more formal arrangement with Solhaven, they'll be in a stronger position because they'll have a direct, appropriate lease? Anything to say around that?
That's exactly right. Yeah, and I do take on board. We've taken on a large asset when the four authorities combined. We are in the process of going through a lot of the land, just making sure that we are clear about the leases, etc. Unfortunately, that is quite a challenge. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we were aware, or we did become aware of this, and now we can formalize that agreement and continue the great work that the charity is doing. But absolutely take that on board, and I can assure all councillors that's exactly the remit that we've got, is making sure we've got all land in good order as we go forward, and we know exactly what we've got, and as we go forward we utilize that in the best way.
Thank you, Stuart. Let's take our last speaker then, which is Councillor Randall. Wendy, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. In light of what I've heard this evening, I'd be mindful to put to this cabinet that you actually defer this decision. And there is a lot of concern coming that we're hearing from residents here. Councillor Hallam has also had a lot of emails from concerned residents. If you're going to do a development like that, surely it is far better to have some sort of public meeting so as all of these things can be ironed out first off. And going forward, we know that if the public are fully aware of what's going on, all their answers are answered way before planning stage. That planning is much more likely to get through because you're not going to have all those residents with objections. So I just don't understand how this has come about and how all of these residents had no idea. You know, there's talking about 12,000, they're talking about 2,000 in the stand, you know, so they don't really know even the size of what this development's going to be. It's obviously the traffic is going to be immense, and yes, that will come out in the planning stage. But if you iron out all of these things beforehand, then at least people are aware. So I would much rather you defer the decision, have a public meeting, let all the residents understand fully of what is being proposed and get them on side. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. I mean, I think there's a number of stages to the firing order of this, isn't there? Nothing gets off the ground at all unless there is some intention to say, in principle, there is a scheme to be had here. Okay, the option here is to vote, completely vote against this and say we're going to give up the whole idea. This is not the right place, or whatever. Number of risks attached to that. I think ultimately there is the opportunity for a really good facility here. We have to make sure that it's a good neighbour as well as a good facility. So we hear that any decision we might take is subject to a high level of satisfaction from neighbours, local neighbours. There's no doubt on that at all. I think not to take any decision, given the safeguards that are in there, given the fact that we want that consultation, we're asking the Cricket Club to do that consultation, we want to hear people's views, something needs to start, some sort of firing gun on something happening. And this decision does not agree a final stadium of 12,000 seats or any other aspect at all. It doesn't agree that the traffic will be adequate. It doesn't agree that the biodiversity won't be affected. All of these are subject twos that need to be resolved through formal processes like planning or for other informal consultation processes. My view, therefore, is that abandoning this altogether doesn't achieve anything or move anything forwards or backwards. We just end up where we are. But that the safeguards need to be in the consultation that now takes place. And Adam, do you have a view on that at all? Am I going in the right direction there?
Yeah, I think clearly Councillor Randall isn't as well informed on this as people who sit around the cabinet table. We are so far away from a planning committee hearing, it's untrue. You know, first and foremost, the Cricket Club needs to obtain the financing for any project to get to a planned stage. And that gives them all the time in the world to carry out a comprehensive and exhaustive consultation exercise, engagement exercise with the public. A deferment of however long just simply creates an overlap with a process that will, which will be carried out anyway. So I think it's a misleading and slightly populist argument from Councillor Randall.
Thank you. We have actually, I think one of the further councillor wants to speak. Councillor McCord. Ian, over to you.
Hey, Chairman. I might take a slightly different view here. Sally, you mentioned a number of things there about girls and women, and that at the very back of the report there's a slide deck from the Cricket Club, and it touches on all of those subjects. I would actually argue at the moment that buying a piece or leasing or whatever a piece of land from a public authority is more open and more transparent. A normal method would be a farmer would sell the land to the Cricket Club, who would then pop up with the planning application, say, hey, look at what we want to do. And this is exactly MK Dons in my patch with their proposed training ground many years ago. You know, that's how it happened, and then you get it. So the very fact that it's the council means it has to, even the first bit in terms of access to the land. The bit that all of the arguments that I heard, and they're all very valid, but this is the wrong forum. Tonight, Cabinet are being asked to deal with a legal issue, to deal with a land and property transaction. and not about the planning and the future use of the land. They're talking about the ownership and who can control it. So I'll come back to that now. The report talks about a 125-year lease. Are you planning a break clause in that? Because something that might be a good idea today might not seem such a good idea in 30 years' time. And it would be quite useful to have something built into that. The report also, as I see it, read it, says that the cricket club will set up a new company, and that new company will run this facility. If that new company then makes more than £50,000 per year, the council will be entitled to half the profits. So what provisions are we going to put in place to ensure that the cricket club cannot just then load the new company with a whole load of management costs, which would conveniently wipe out any profits and suck them back to the mothership? The other thing which I have raised with you outside of the meeting, but I'll do it publicly, is what is the footprint of the piece of ground that's being sold? Now, I see my good friend and property developer, the chairman of the cricket club in here, and the land on page 484 is also replicated on page 524 of the cricket club slide deck. Now that shows a box with a red line around it, and beside that there on page 525, the red line is extended to take in a couple or three extra fields. Let me just be clear as to exactly the piece of ground that you propose to do. Now, I suspect at this point you can still agree the principle if you wish, and then that's a matter for the lawyers. But it would be quite useful just to define exactly what that red line is, because it's a little confusing between, which I think is a report anyway. I'm not that bothered about the cricket club slide deck, because that's the cricket club slide deck, and the one with the council logo on, I think, is the one we should go to. But I think we should make that clear with an access way, I presume, across that land to get to it. So that's really all I wish to say.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Thank you. His comments were helpful. And you're right, the nature of a public piece of land like this does mean public decisions like this, rather than just buy it and suddenly it appears from a private ownership. It's an interesting question there about break clause, and I think a hint of probably break clause or failure clause in the event of the failure of the scheme. I don't know if we'll have an answer on how we would ensure that cost was not loaded against the company so that the council didn't gain, but I just think it's something that will be explored until we're happy with it. Is that fair to say, Stuart?
It is, and I think some of the confusion about the cricket club and the commercial aspects, and would that commercial aspects be transferred onto land? I think by setting up a separate company that controls all activity on this land, keeps the two audits, if you like, very separate. But you're right, that is something that needs to be looked at from a legal perspective, and that will be something that we've set out clearly in the heads of terms we want to do more work on to appreciate that question or conundrum, if you like, that Councillor McCord raised there. So more work to be done, but I think the principle seems to be a rational one.
Thank you, Stuart. Rebecca, were you going to comment there? Over to you.
Yes, I'm just going to comment on the interesting outcomes actually of this debate, which is that chicken and egg, what comes first in terms of public awareness of what's coming on. And I think this is an entirely reasonable way of something coming into the public domain. And it's happened very quickly, but it has been well flagged in the public, and they've had an opportunity to speak. I don't think that this is the venue for it to be killed stone dead, which is obviously what some of the speakers would like to see. But it has flagged to the cricket club and to the council generally the standards of the outcome that we expect to see in a planning application, and anything further that comes forward. Anything other than a really good quality, well thought out, well consulted planning application will have great difficulty. And I think that the chairman of the cricket clubs here will have taken that on board, and that will be a very useful outcome as a result of this evening's debate.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. I think, well, it has been, isn't it? We were looking to see these issues resolved satisfactorily. Yeah, great. Okay, we covered. Mike, further comment?
Just a final sort of comment from me, really. I think what we need to do immediately, because people are concerned about this. So I think what my ask of the cricket club is they speak to the Malton Parish Council guys outside. maybe organise a date to get or coordinate to get a room within the community centre where you can have an open forum where people can come along and ask questions as a result of that. But I think the second part of this that needs to be done, I think once you have that big meeting where people come along and everyone can attend, I think there almost needs to be a stakeholder meeting as a second meeting and actually ask some of these groups like the charity that we've heard from this evening and the parish council itself and Malton Leys Residents Association also, how can you help us shape this? You know, I think that's a question that, because I've already heard good ideas from residents. I've already heard things as synergies from some of the outcomes that the charity are looking to achieve. So let's get a second meeting around the table as well, where there's some stakeholders that can help shape this. And what my ideal outcome to this is that nobody in the local area is surprised when the planning application is submitted. If it is submitted, but nobody is surprised about the contents of that because actually so many people will have been involved in the shaping of this. And I think this could be an ideal, the opportunity from this now is that we can use this as a marker, as a way of saying, this is, look at what the cricket club did with this consultation. So I think there's some opportunities out of this, and I recognise the angst that's been caused by it, but I think there are opportunities we explore. And I'd urge people to get those meeting dates in the diary, and we'll, you know, I'll help advertise that to residents in my patch too.
And I think we would seek and we would continue to be involved in those consultation meetings. We hadn't ready to speak, but we're lucky enough to have the chairman of the cricket club with you. Did you just signal, Mr. Warren, you were going to make a comment?
Thank you. Thanks, Leader. Thanks, Councillor Hallam. I think the key thing for tonight for us, well, I didn't plan to speak, as you know, was to listen. And I've listened very, very carefully to two stakeholders from the charity, which, as the council are aware, when it came to our attention, we have no objection to them staying, and we certainly see ourselves working with them. But I think the overall message is that, and I think Councillor McCord cleared it very well, this is a facility and an option for us to go forward and start communicating with the neighbourhood. We can't at the minute, Councillor Hallam, because it's not a piece of land that's in our control. So it wouldn't have been right for me and my staff to go along and start talking to neighbours and your parishioners when we had no real right to, Leader. So I think you can sort of rest assured that going forward, full engagement will happen. And I suggest that, Councillor Hallam, you're involved with that as well as the parish council. But one thing I just want to do is manage expectations in terms of time. This meeting's not going to happen next week because we don't know the outcome of tonight, firstly. And then I have to take it back to my board of directors for consideration of what we do next. So whatever the decision is tonight and whatever you decide to do, please manage expectations in terms of time, because this is not going to be a meeting that we're going to have next week. But what you will be assured of, and my chief exec's here as well, is you will have full communication and transparency from the cricket club, because this is good for the town. This is absolutely good for the town. And, you know, sport is so good for mental health and well-being and welfare for children and boys and girls. And the 12,500 stadium is not going to be built day one. And, you know, we're looking at, it's a temporary system, it's a temporary facility. So that's caused some angst, and I understand that. I totally understand that. But rest assured, we as a club, Leader, will be looking to work with the parishioners, with the council, and with yourselves as well, because reputationally, we want to make sure that, you know, you're proud of what we build there. And I think we're very lucky in the town to have 3 professional sporting clubs. Not many clubs can boast that. Not many towns can boast that, and we want to get behind that because, you know, we're very lucky, and also within the Shire, we've got Silverstone. So, you know, we should be very proud as a community that we've got that. And so, Councillor Hallam, we will work with your parishioners, but please manage expectations in terms of time.
Yeah.
Thank you. Did you want to respond?
Yeah,
Mike?
I'll just come back. I mean, like, I think we all recognise and we almost take it for granted, don't we, that we've got 3 sporting clubs plus Silverstone because we're so used to it. So I think what people don't always see about the cricket club is the work that you do with the younger people in the winter that are probably doing nets right now as we're talking here, that are doing that and are not getting into trouble and things like that. So I think this is really all for me is all about communication. So I'm absolutely happy to be involved in that. I'm involved in other projects that are trying to get off the ground to promote sport and well-being in other ways. So I'm happy to be that link, and I'm happy to manage, you know, time expectations of people as well. So more than happy to be involved. Is shaping that, and I think we can hopefully we can do that well moving forward collectively.
Thanks, Councillor Hallam. Is there anything further?
Let's
you
throw.
for me, Leader?
No, you step forward, Gavin. Shall we see? Are there any other questions that any of the cabinet or officers would like to ask? No, that's helpful. Thank you for coming forward with your comments. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, great. Is that everything? Is there any other summing up you want to do, Adam, on your report? Are you covered?
Oh, just very quickly sum up and saying that I think tonight has been a really valuable starting point to the wider debate and engagement that we're going to have from this point forward, assuming that you know the vote is in favour of the proposal. And you know, I do think it's important that where appropriate and where the risk to the council is minimal, as in the proposals tonight, that we do support those, you know, those 3 first-class sporting teams in Northampton and the surrounding area that set us apart from so many other towns and cities across England. I think it's only Bristol, Manchester, London, Leicester, and ourselves that have league football, Premiership Rugby Union, and first-class county cricket. So, you know, it's something to be incredibly proud of, and well managed, well communicated, and listening to the public at all times. I think that this could be a really, really positive project for Northampton and Northamptonshire.
Brilliant. Thank you, Adam. It's absolutely fantastic. What's the do site? This could be a really good project. We just got to make sure it's a good neighbour too. Now, I have just noticed, I don't know as you were signalling earlier, but one of the gentlemen from Malton Parish Council, did you want to make a very quick comment, if I could ask?
My name's Graham Moss. I'm part of Malton Parish Council. I've been involved with sport for 50 years.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I understand. And a couple of one of the reasons for stopping you there is unless you use the microphone, you're not on the recording and you're not seen. So that was partly why I thought it might be a quicker comment. But I think, Stuart, did you want to comment on that first? We do what we can support teams in Malton. I know we've got a real problem over the newer football pitches, which we're having frequent meetings with the football club, aren't we? Over to you for any comment you wanted to make on.
That's right, Chair. And again, I'd recommend any parish that has got ambition in terms of sport to contact us. That's exactly what the cricket club did. They had an ambition to come forward. But in Malton in particular, I would suggest that there's been so much development taking place that conversations in terms of Section 106, in terms of the future of the local plan, there are many opportunities for parishes to get involved in the development process to set out those ambitions. And again, I'm more than happy, as I've done on a number of occasions, is to go up to Malton and meet the parish council and to have those discussions. So the offer is always there and it's open to all parishes. We need to know what their ambitions are so that we can then align land or opportunities to that. So Again, happy to come up and have a chat.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, we've all, one way or another, visited Malton, haven't we? We know it well, most of us, from the cabinet and the senior team. And we've had regular meetings with parish clerks on particularly the larger councils on 106, but no, not to take that away. Gladly come and talk to you about that. Okay, I think we probably have the last of the contributions on that. I want to thank everybody for their comments. I think it's been tremendously useful. Our stated position is we want to iron these wrinkles out, but if this is a great project, if we get this started, we then start ironing the wrinkles out to make it not only a good project, but a good neighbour. I'm going to suggest, if we may, that I draw your attention to the recommendations that are at section 3. This fires that starting gun, but it by no means mean that anything you see there will actually be what goes ahead. There's lots of safeguard processes in there. But I'll ask the cabinet, if you would like to signal your agreement, please, to that one single recommendation. Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay, thank you very much. We'll pause a moment in case anybody who came just for that item wants to leave. Thank you. Thank you very much, all of you, for coming. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, for allowing us to bring that forward. I'm sure you'd agree it was the right thing to do with the number of people who are interested in it. We're going to get back to the agenda. What we're going to do then, just to remind you, is we'll take shortly in a second item 6, report from over in scrutiny, although we've put none down there. We didn't want to feel that we'd buried the important scrutiny committee report within the appendices on item 7. So we're going to give a separate report section to that. Councillor McCall will come forward, present that. We can have some discussion. Then for context, we're going to go to item 9, which is the revenue monitoring, which then puts us in the right place to talk about the budget. So let's move to item 6, if we may. And we welcome back Councillor McCall. Ian, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wish to start with a word of thanks. I'm most grateful to the time given to me and the committee in preparing for the budget scrutiny. And I'm reluctant to name anyone, as I know I'll miss someone and probably offend them. But if I do, I'll apologise for that. I want to thank all members of the committee for their work, and those who were not on the committee, who attended for the breakout sessions. That was particularly helpful when I put out a call for help, given that we are a smaller committee. We had a good mix, and they're all named in the report that is attached. To yourself, Adam, Matt, Malcolm, who all attended as the relevant portfolio holders. And of course, we're especially indebted to Martin, James, Jane, Stuart, for all their help, along with about 20, I think, other officers who attended with the various areas of specialism. And finally, can I thank Tracy, Richard, and Maisie, who support the committee throughout the year, but they managed to turn our incoherent ramblings into coherent English, and they come out as sensible recommendations in the end. So thank you, one and all. Turning to the report, it starts on page 205 of the agenda, but as always, we were limited by time and resource. But we did make a very conscious decision not to look at the Children's Trust this year. As the report makes clear from the outset, the committee is not ignoring the single biggest overspend in the council. Rather, we felt a little breathing space was required to allow the various interventions that we are aware are underway and started in autumn to take effect or not. We will return to the trust in the course of our work, and I must say there was a palpable sense of disappointment on learning that the trust had once again reviewed its year-end forecast upward to almost 30 million last week when we met to finalise these recommendations. The committee, all members and all parties, take a very pragmatic and realistic view of the financial envelope in which we operate. And whilst many may want more, the recommendations, I think, are balanced and realistic. We speak, as we should, as a critical friend, and whether some consider it too critical or too friendly, I'll leave others to take that view. We need to get the message out to residents about the spend and the profile of it, On page 228, we show that 62% of our spend is on adults and children's services. A few thousand people and 1,200 children are taking up over 60 pence in every pound spent by this council. The waste, highways and planning then take up 23%, meaning that all the other services battle for 15% of the total spend. I hope you've read the areas that the committee probed, and I won't bother, but I'll repeat the main recommendations, but I won't bother to go through all of the other items. One large area of overspend and continued spend is temporary accommodation in relation to homeless. There was a lot of spirited debate on this one, passions high in the breakout room all round, and you know you're in trouble whenever I'm the person called to conciliate. The committee would like to see Cabinet accelerate consideration of innovative modular housing and repurposing options to try and reduce the spend and get better value for money in this area, and that recommendation is at 1.1.4. Turning to adult social care, the committee is aware of the demographic time bomb ticking in the district, and this is especially true here in the south of the district, where the number of those aged 75 plus is set to increase dramatically in the next few years. Therefore, we ask the Cabinet set out a strategy to deal with that demographic changes over the medium term, and that's a recommendation at 1.1.7. My Deputy Chair, Sam Rumans, took up the task of looking over many items that often get overlooked and overshadowed by the larger numbers that I just spoke about, and that list is at 1.1.9. First of all, audit fees. We're getting mugged here. And not just WNC, I think it's all of local government. Recently, the auditors announced increase of 150%, which is totally outrageous. We did check with Cecile, it was not her shoe budget. It has risen from 350,000 to 875,000, and we do have to question the value for money. But I certainly hope to see a dramatic increase in the speed of audits and the sign-off, as to date this council has been unable to get a single set of accounts audited and signed off, and we're about to enter the 4th year of his existence. And that's nothing to do with Martin or anybody in the room. It's got to do with the failure of the audit on this, and I'll leave it there because I'll be straying into Cecile's area. The Adult Social Care Committee, chaired by Rosie Herring, requested that we review the council tax hardship fund. The report set that out at 1.1.13 and sets out the background to the spend. And we've been spending approximately 250,000 a year on this, and we now have a balance of 70. So the committee asks Cabinet to review this and make an appropriate contribution to ensure that we can support those most in need in the district. The committee, at my request, reviewed the road maintenance spend to understand the funding, and the work identified that funding is ad hoc and relies on lumps of cash from central government as one-off eye-catching initiatives. As we enter the new year, the roads maintenance spend is 1.9 million lower in 24-25 than at present. However, I do recognise that with Jeremy Hunt's budget coming next month, there is ample opportunity to pull a rabbit from the hat. However, the recommendation to Cabinet is to look at the long-term base funding investment in roads maintenance and reduce their reliance on these one-off and rather lumpy funding streams. And on this subject of one-off funding, I hope the Chancellor also looks at household support funds that helps those who are most in need, for extension to free school meals, through holidays, food banks and grocery vouchers, etc. At present, this council gets 5.2 million, and we have no leeway to replace that should they carry through on their current position of ceasing that funding. The committee looked at trading standards. This is something of a Cinderella service, but it does vital work on public safety. And we know that this was a service that was heavily impacted by NCC as it went down, but we are concerned that they are not able to fulfill their statutory duties. And with a bit more funding, they may be able to generate income that we're missing out on. And the recommendation at 1.1.14 part 3 is that Cabinet gives assurance to the level of funding that training standards is sufficient to enable the council to fulfil its statutory duties, and gives consideration to investing income generating initiatives which will provide greater safety for consumers. And finally, as a committee, we felt it was necessary to flag up the use of reserves. Page 39 of the report shows that the 1st of April 23, the beginning of this financial year, the opening balance was 114.1 million. By the end of the financial year, we're projecting a reserves balance of 89.1 million. And by the end of the budget that comes in the next item, we're projecting a balance of 71 million. The reasons are given and they're understandable and they're there for us to know about, but that rate of burn is not sustainable in the medium term. So that's all I wish to say. I once again thank you and all the people who took part in the scrutiny. I'm giving the view of committee to Cabinet. I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you, Ed, and thank you very much. First of all, very concise report, and thank you for taking the time. We were very grateful to everybody who took part in the task and finished the scrutiny members. And I think it's fair to say, hopefully we can say this collectively, we've got a good system going on here. We felt that challenge. We heard ideas and so on. So I think this is now running pretty well, really. Does anybody want to address any particular comments or questions? Malcolm, you're going to come back on some of those points?
Yes, Chair, certainly would. And I think the first starting point is that you know, 7 meetings there, and I think you got a good result. I mean, it's a good operation, I would say, from start to finish. And I think last year, you may recall, we had a discussion. You said there wasn't enough consultation involvement. Well, hopefully that was good, because my personal view is it worked very well. And I'd like to say that for a start. A couple of small points here, really. That we've decided, and we've actually put it into the budget now, or will be, on the hardship fund up to 150, as we sort of discussed, and that's based on 450 being spent over 3 years. So hopefully it's about right. We'll see, but we'll see how that goes. But that's the current position. The other thing was quite an interesting point, really. I nearly said it on the night, but it wasn't appropriate. You know, as far as the trading standards is concerned, we're currently discussing with them, or Simon is their new premises, different premises. And that's a great opportunity to set them up right. I think now the trick with this one, of course, getting the spec right. Where's the trading standards start and finish, and that's where we are at the moment. So it's no, I think there's some good recommendations, and I think the process was good. That was it. So that's all I have to say, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Fiona.
I just wanted to add my support to scrutiny members and probably many other members of our council over the lack of the funding for our children that's come out of the hardship fund, and to tell him that we are spending many hours at the moment looking at ways in which we could mitigate that without the money, which we know may not come. So we are very concerned about it and looking at areas that we can help where we can.
That's the Household Support Fund, isn't it? Which I think Matt might have been about to mention. Matt, you're coming in next, I think.
I was just going to pick up on that point and reference. Well, first of all, thank Ian and the committee for the report and the comments made by Ian just there. And first of all, reference the challenge around adult social care and how we can square the circle of you know, the budget and the pressures as we move forward over the next 2 or 3 years, which is absolutely huge. And you know, welcome scrutiny's input on that and how we can manage that, because that is going to be a huge challenge for us, aside from the good work that we're trying to do as with our system partners around sort of prevention and everything else that's happening. But yeah, it's going to be challenging, and that's recognised nationally as a something that councils have got to try and find a solution with. But also reference Household Support Fund, and you know, as a cabinet group, we had a debate and a informed conversation about that yesterday with officers, as Fiona said, that if it doesn't come forward, it is something we're going to seriously miss. And what does that mean for some of the more vulnerable families, especially children, you know, and vouchers and things at holiday period. We have got, as we discussed yesterday, the Easter holiday period covered. So we are trying to be proactive with how we're going to maybe communicate the value of the Household Support Fund to our MPs, alongside things like the LGA. They're doing a lot of work on this and lobbying government. So hopefully, as Ian mentioned, there might be a rabbit pulled out of the hat, but
we don't know about that yet and what it might be. So we're trying to work with our partners to sort of highlight this and mitigate it where we can. But thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Matt. You're right. You're right to point out we have joined all of those lobbying things where the LGA have done collective letters and so on, and we are now just in the process as a result yesterday going to write to our own MPs and illustrate the vast number of people that have been supported through this scheme so far within their constituencies, and hope that that brings some pressure on as well. The thought of losing that now when people are still struggling as they have done, we're certainly not out of the woods at all, are we? So we're keeping the pressure up. Share your point about audit fees as well. That's a tremendous frustration that an auditor might normally challenge you on if you enter a contract that then goes up. But there we go. That's what they call the PSSA, I think, isn't it? Yeah.
Don't get me started on auditors.
Yeah. Any other comments, questions for Ian? No, collectively again, Ian, we thank you very much for the work and your task and finished it and you led for us. Thank you. Okay, so that's very helpful. Those suggestions that have come forward. What we're now going to do, and I thought it's an excellent suggestion by Malcolm, is let's actually look at the revenue monitoring for period 9. Because what that does is gives us the context for where we are now before we then move ahead and start looking at the following year. Malcolm, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, just for those that aren't familiar with this, then the chart I always look at and base the discussions on is on page 295 of my list. Have I got the right one? Yeah, sure. And I'll give a moment to catch that. And the important numbers there are on the P9 outturn forecast. And that's the forecast of what we expect, where we expect to be at the year end. And bizarrely, as in all council things, positive numbers on this chart are bad news. Numbers with brackets round are good news. Quite the contrary to normal business. So the important point there is we're currently predicting a situation of just under 3.5 million overspend, which I know is a small percentage, but nonetheless, it's not what we want, where we want to be. And clearly, there's the work on. We've got 3 months to go still, and we're just period 10 is just coming out the woodwork, so we'll see where that's going. The numbers that jump off the page is only 2 really. And the first is the period now out to forecast variance, which is in the Children's Trust. I mean, Ian's alluded to it. I'm not going to bang on about too long, but that's a 16.4 million overspend in our bit. Now, what that would mean, Ian alluded to a number of 30 million potentially. Now, the significance of that is that's the total budget for this year was 150 million, and that's split 55% for us, balance to the north. So they're overspending potentially, as they're predicting an overspend of 30 million, and our share of that is 16.405. That's why the numbers are different than the ones Ian quoted. Now, if that stays as it is, then 3.493 is the likely outturn. Obviously, we'll be doing as much we can to mitigate. And the year end is always, the last quarter is always things happen in the last quarter because you're balancing things and making sure you're looking towards the year end. So we'll see. But it's been a very difficult period because of that. If the 16.4 was not there, then we'd all be arguing about where we spend the money. But it is there. So that, Chair, about sums it up, I think. I've got little else to say.
That's great. Thank you, Malcolm. Just a few other comments that we might want to make. The Children's Trust obviously is a really important budget. We know that nationally we're seeing big demand on this. We accept that. We absolutely are. It's a demand-led service as well, which means that we cannot always predict what's coming through the door. That doesn't make, just to correct if I sound soft on overspend, I'm not at all. It just shows you've got to be cleverer with budgeting in Children's Trust because you just do not know what's going to come along. We spend a lot of time discussing this. I can report, as I've touched on before, that we have a lot of activity going with the Children's Trust. We developed a really strong challenge to the relationship we have, which means that we have our best senior people in there, looking at transformation projects, looking at how accounting is done, looking at how the decisions are taken that lead to the costs. So I wouldn't want to give the impression, in case any of our speakers were perhaps particularly going to focus on that, because it is a frightening number, wouldn't want to give the impression at all that nothing was happening, or indeed that the arrangement which separates the Children's Trust from us compared to other departments was holding us back in terms of looking for opportunities. Sarah particularly is gunning hard on transformation projects to make significant savings. And I don't know if Sarah wanted to say anything. I think at one point Anna might have made some further comments about the transformation. Did you want to chip in on any of the transformation stuff on children's, Anna? Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, we've got about 32 projects running at the moment for children's, and I think key to it all is, as you'd imagine, they're kind of short, medium, and long-term changes. So there's lots of immediate things that we're doing, which the team have been working on. Maybe a good example of that is we found a lot of care leavers, for example, haven't been claiming housing benefit. So the trust has been paying for their actual rent and things when housing benefit should cover it. So quite sort of smaller operational things, but with significant sums of savings that are being generated. But right the way up to really big programs around prevention, demand prevention, and how we work with families to put in place the support that stops them getting into crisis in the beginning. And we're seeing some, some significant cases. I think already some of the work we're doing, some of the work with strategic partners that are in there has found about another £4 million worth of savings on top of what they'd already had in for next year's budget. So it's going in the right direction. As the leaders indicated, we can never be sure exactly who's going to turn up and when they're going to turn up. We had a situation just last week with a lot of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. And you just can't, legislate for that. However, what's very important then is once they're into the system, we're very clear that we've got the right places, we commission things ourselves where we can, and we have the right arrangements to make sure that we're cost effective. And I think we could be more confident, and we'll do some briefings, I think, for members and cabinet on what that looks like about the work that's happening. And we've put the right resources and capacity in there with the North as well to make sure that we can drive that at pace and make sure we land those.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really helpful. Fiona, you're going to comment, I think?
I was just, I do apologise for my croaky throat this evening. I just wanted to highlight something which I know affects all the membership of our council, that what we are trying to do is to mitigate these costs, because we can't turn children away. That's just not something we can do. It's our legal duty to accept these children. But what we are trying to do is to provide children's homes of our own, which belong to West Northants Council, where we can, and they will come forward into the planning system for approval. And what I want to just emphasise here and now is that where appropriate, our members do get behind that and approve them, because we have had an incident, rightly or wrongly, I don't know the details of all of them, where quite a number we've put forward already have not been approved because of members coming forward and saying they didn't want it to be there. Now, I think we need to look very carefully at that, because our planning applications are put forward in the best way for proper. Stuart would not allow us to put forward something that was totally unsuitable. So I just do want members to look at these favourably, because if we own the care home, we're paying, that's a far cheaper option, and sometimes I hope a better option for our children than paying the exorbitant prices that we're paying into the private sector at the moment.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you. That's really helpful. Wanted to spend a little time there and make a few comments about the trust, because it is that massive thing, but hopefully that gives you an assurance that, first of all, there's a lot of work going on to reduce costs, but that also all of us are involved in ensuring that we do everything we can to get those costs down. Having taken it along, let's now go to our two speakers. The first one is Councillor Holland-Ellermere. Keith, over to you, followed in due course by Councillor Randall. Keith, welcome.
So thank you to Martin Henry and the finance team for the transparency during the scrutiny process. Recognise there's a lot of challenges here. I mean, it was really good to hear Martin give an example of one of the cost increases at the Children's Trust and how that impacted recently. Of course, I'm also conscious of, in a neighbouring ward to mine, the fact that Binning Aquadrome has been flooded for the second time, which basically means will be pressure on temporary accommodation again. So thank you for the transparency, recognise it's tough, and just really welcome that openness about the challenges.
Thank you. Thank you, Keith. Thank you very much indeed. And then Councillor Randall, Wendy, over to you.
Chair, thank you. I'll just run down quickly what I've got here. Dedicated schools grant. So we're forecasting an overspend of 5.1 million. Much of this is for SEND pupils. Many SEND children aren't accessing school for different reasons, but if they did, I'd expect that overspend would be even greater. We're sending pupils out of county, which shows what a lack of provision we have in West Northants. When the new SEND school opens, that should alleviate some of that pressure, but it won't be open to all year groups in the first year. How many SEND children are we failing due to not having suitable provision? Who is checking the welfare of families that aren't accessing education and working with them to see if a suitable outcome can be found? So what are you doing in the meantime, and why are your budget predictions so far out? Children's Trust, yet again, we see huge overspend, but is this because we're setting unrealistic figures? We know there are staff shortages, we know we're using agency staff, and you know that more children are coming into care. We've seen huge overspend year on year, but as yet I've not seen anything put in place for early intervention. Anna has just said there are interventions going on, but I'm not aware of them. We know in the near future a pilot scheme for a family hub is coming in Towcester, but how long is that pilot scheme running, as we need action now in all areas? We know that Sure Starts worked, and since the Tories decided to close them, we have seen a significant rise in children coming into care, and many of our young children are left suffering in the meantime. Communities and opportunities, forecast overspend is 1.48 million. You state in 2.46, the forecasted overspend of 1.5 million is pressure of temporary and supported accommodation and purchased accommodation, and it's continuing to rise. So what are we doing to alleviate this? In 2.48, you state that overspends are forecast in the museum service due to the allocation of non-domestic rates at Abingdon Park Museum from 2017 to 23-24. But I thought that museums got a mandatory charity relief grant and discretionary relief, so they didn't pay anything, but maybe I've got that wrong. Both our museums are free, so surely we factor the running costs of the building and staffing into the budget. A museum gives the town a heart. It's a non-profit making facility that is a real asset to West Northamptonshire, preserving the history of our community. You can imagine my surprise and disappointment that I read in the NN Journal that WNC are looking to make redundancies and we are to lose staff, and in particular, specialised curators. If you're saying the museum is overstaffed, then why have we recruited staff since becoming WNC? Please explain to me why this is happening. Again, how did we get it so wrong? You mentioned nothing about library services in the report, but I understand redundancies are expected there also. Have library services been disaggregated yet? And if not, how much of that will impact on the proposed restructure? Adult social care, 2.53, again, another overspend, this time 4.3 million. I thought the aim of keeping people in their own homes with care support would be reducing the budget, as it's cheaper to keep people at home rather than going into a care home. Are we expecting to see an overspend year on year? 2.53, it alludes to backdated invoices being raised. Does it mean that we aren't raising invoices when we should be? And if not, why not? 2.55 states that Longlands in Daventry struggles to recruit permanent staff and are having to use agency staff. Unfortunately, people are struggling to live on a minimum wage and are instead earning £3 more in local warehouses. Wouldn't it be more cost effective to pay staff more rather than relying on agency staff? And staff in there must be extremely low. Place and economy, I note that there is an underspend of 0.94, but 0.7 is due to delays in service restructure and vacant posts. How are the vacant posts reflecting on the services it provides? Oh, that's it. Thank you.
That's
I
good.
thought I've got 3 minutes, such a rush.
Thank you. You know, we thought it was so good, we kicked you down for 4.5. I think it's fair to say there's something there for everybody, wasn't there? Fiona, did you want to make a comment?
I'll let you sit down, Wendy. Wendy, I am impressed. I'm impressed. Gone through the detail. Why don't you all do this? That's how to do it. What you want to do now, not going to answer them tonight, it's too many. Put them in an email, we'll answer them. Got to bear in mind also a little bit of advice here. Keith there came to a briefing on Friday. Let's give it to Keith before at the briefing. That's the best place to do it. You've got 2 hours. Or, well, not, yeah, but Keith, that's the way to do it. Do it at the briefing, but if not, put it in writing. There's too many there to answer on tonight.
Okay, couple of people. Fiona, you're going to come in. Over to you.
Yes, just to recognise Councillor Randall's comments on the high needs block. We're well aware of the pressures that we have there. As she says, our high needs block pressure is 5.6 million at the moment, and this has increased by 1.2 million since the position reported in period 7. The Drexel grant is actually not part of the council's grant funding. It's a separate grant that we get directly from government. The forecast pressure on the high needs block is of concern, but the large majority of the remaining high needs block overspend is mainly due to increased demand and the cost for specialist placements provision, which is not available locally, and we fully accept that. We are addressing this by supporting more mainstream schools to meet higher levels of need to keep more children close to their homes and to reduce the need for more expensive specialised placements are avoided then. The capital programme includes £34 million investment at the moment, creating an additional 600 places and reducing financial pressures over the medium term. This includes the new, as mentioned, 250 place special school at Tiffield to open in September 2025, and we've now the planning permission is in place for that, and work clearing the site is already underway. And continuation of works to increase resource places in mainstream schools and special school expansions, which we are working on a daily basis. We are just about to bring forward plans for a special unit attached to King Sutton Primary School, which is at the very bottom of our district, which will be of huge benefit for those young people who live in that area, who are way, way away from all of the other schools that have a send offer, and would be very long journeys for them. So we're very pleased to be opening that one next, hopefully. We have got others in the pipeline, which we'll bring forward at the appropriate time.
Adam, you want to make a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Similar to Malcolm, that few too many questions rattled off very quickly, so I'd like to Councillor Randall with the answers to most of them. Just on the library's restructure, it's a shame that such a level of detail has entered the public domain whilst the consultation's ongoing. So I'm limited what I can say tonight, but equally, I would just point to the December cabinet papers, which in the budget, in the draft budget, did identify a museum organisational restructure with a saving of £361,000. So if opposition members are reading papers properly, that should raise some questions. And I'm surprised that they didn't raise questions over the last 2 months.
Thank you. Did anybody else want to comment on any of the points at all? Ken, you don't normally come and join us. If you wanted to make a quick point, let's bring you on as a guest speaker very quickly.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. Very, very quickly, actually, I've heard an enormous amount of negativity, and I don't want to get into politics, but one thing I would say is that when you consider the directors, assistant directors, and also cabinet members have actually achieved virtually a balanced budget. When you consider some of the other councils, the majority of them have actually got significant overspends. So therefore, I take my hat off to the colleagues here, and in fact, as I say, to have a balanced budget is fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you for making that point. I slightly thought that as we went through Wendy's 4.5 minutes, you know, the challenges that come along, that is a list of challenges. actually it's a tribute to this council and the officers and the cabinet members and the assistant directors and the managers and so on, to financial discipline and the energy they bring to finding savings, that in all these circumstances, when other councillors are struggling so much, we're looking at around about 1% overspend at the moment, which seems to be moving in the right direction. So I think that's an excellent point, Ken. Thank you. Well, while we're at it, Ian, you were signalling there. Did you have a further point to make? We'll bring you in.
That as per our constitution, can you ensure that any emails answering Wendy's question asked are circulated to all members or appended to the cabinet minutes?
Fair enough. We can gladly do that. Okay, are we all done on comments, questions on that item? Item 9. Recommendations are, as always, at section 3. So if I can just ask you, please, will you signal your agreement? Is that agreed? Thank you. Let's just get back and track down where we are. I think, Malcolm, with our rejigged order, that takes us on to item 7, doesn't it? Final budget and medium-term financial plan.
That's fine, Chair. 7 or yeah, that'd be fine. The best way to understand this one is to turn to page, you get it right. I suppose the big page there. I want the total page here. Turn to page 63. Now that is the sort of the total. That's where the funding comes from as well. I don't propose to go through in detail on this one again, because but to touch on the major points, because this has gone through a great deal of scrutiny, as we saw earlier on, and I think there aren't many points I could make that the scrutiny committee haven't brought out. It's a very comprehensive report, so I'm not going to go into great detail. And the issues are the same again. You see what the total number is. We're talking about a net budget of 890, but the figures are around just north of the 400 million mark. So it's a serious amount of money. And the issue is exactly the same again. Now, the important point to see from this one is, where are we going on the Children's Trust? As you can see with any of the budget, towards the back end of the year, there's some ups and there's downs and one thing, and generally those can be handled. You know, you get good with the bad. Children's Trust has been a major in this year. We want to try and make sure it's not a major next year. That's the obvious starting point. Now, so what we've done, we've agreed a significantly higher budget than last year. Last year we agreed with the Children's Trust 150 million. This year the budget is 177.4, and there's some one-offs on top of that. Takes it up to a little higher than 180, but we'll deal with 177.4. Now, we're obviously very concerned. If they hit their 177.4, we are very unlikely to have a problem next year. However, we don't particularly want to go through next year the same as we've done this year, for obvious reasons. So what we've done, we thought, well, how do we do this? How do we set about this? And we think cooperation is a far better way. Bear in mind, we have absolutely no control over their budget. They want to spend A, they spend A. Want to spend B, they spend B. So all we've got to do is to deal with the outcome of their actions. So therefore, the best thing we can do is to support them, influence them, help them. I think, as Jonathan said, we put some of our best people, Sarah, over there, some of our best people in there to support them. And we've got some other plans to meet up with them. We had a major meeting with them last week. There's some serious and hopefully very good productivity issues in there, £8 million and that order, maybe a bit more. And also we've got a monthly meeting with their finance and managing director or chief director to try and support that situation again. So we'll have a very close eye on it. However, you know, it's the risk. It's the risk. And so I think all the others, I think that we'll have our ups and downs, but they'll be relatively minor. So that's the big story. Anyway, the other thing is we're looking for a 2.99 plus 2% increase, as you all are no doubt well aware. And this is a step where we've been through scrutiny. We've consulted with both parties, and I've taken the with the scrutiny as being sort of the Independence Party, and all that's gone through consultation of the public. Tonight is to say yes, you can take this to full council or not, and that's where we are. Thank you, Chair.
Jolly good. Thank you, Malcolm. We'll bring our speakers in a moment, but just to confirm, we will then be adding a recommendation when we vote to this. And I mention it in case any of the speakers intended to mention it. That recommendation will be it is recommended that Cabinet add a further recommendation to, Cabinet will add a further recommendation to full council to top up the council tax hardship fund by 150,000 to be funded from one-off earmark reserved at the discretion of the Executive Director of Finance. So that's taken on board, as Malcolm mentioned earlier. Let's go to our speakers then. They are in the following order. First, we have Councillor Keith Holland-Delamere, followed by Councillor Purser and Councillor McCord. So Keith, back to you.
So, I mean, we were looking at a very different sort of scenario during the budget process until the last minute changes. It's clear, I mean, we are still very dependent on these contingencies. So, I mean, when you talk about 3.5 million for last year, we potentially we could be using up all of our contingencies again. So that's sometimes always a bit disingenuous about actually how we're keeping the budget, because basically we are putting in the sort of safety net to basically show that we're keeping on track, but actually we are putting in that into the budget. I mean, there's not much I'm going to comment now, because basically it'll be next week really when we'll comment more.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Did you want to comment on that point, Malcolm?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, thanks, Keith. Appreciate that. And in a normal business, you don't put contingencies of this nature in. I'm not used to doing this, and I've had many discussions with Martin on my left on that very subject. However, you've all seen what's happened these last 3 years, and so we've Martin's always prevailed on this because he said the right thing, and as it turned out. And so you put these contingencies in. It's quite different than reserves. Don't confuse this with reserves. Reserves, we're not looking about touching the base reserves or the that's the 35 million. That's an important number. Then you've got the other allocated reserves. Well, they're allocated, so you know that's fair game. But you put a contingency in for what might happen. All going to go sweetness tonight? I doubt it. Maybe, if only. We'll see. But we make no excuse putting 10 million in because of the history. I haven't got a better idea.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Let's go to our next speaker, who's on his way already. Councillor Purser. Bob, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Just to thank finance staff for their briefings. I come away from thinking that even I understand what's going on, which 10 minutes later I don't, but at the time I do. So thank you very much for their patience with our questions as well. I suppose to welcome the money being put aside for the Household Support Fund, I think that's absolutely vital. I'll come to that when we talk about the housing issues later on, but that's welcome news and very, very welcome. I think we still have this problem of the government giving us short-term annualized budgets that change at the very last minute. You know, we lost money the week before Christmas and we've gained it the week after Christmas. That seems to be absolutely daft. You know, what are we doing? We've got, hopefully, a different government will give us a long-term view for local government finance, and I think we will all welcome that. And I would hope that on the household support fund that our MPs have been asking government about this. I'd hope we'd have some assurance that they've been going really hard on getting that to happen, because that's what it is, the failure of the national funding that is causing this problem. Just on the audit commission, I mean, I think the abolition of the audit commission was a great mistake when there was the bonfire of the Quangos, and it's resulted now in local authorities across the country having this problem. When we had a very, well, some people thought the audit commission was overly oppressive, but actually in hindsight, it was a very useful process that we had. I think coming to the Children's Trust, the issue is, how do we shift towards prevention? How do we make that shift? And I think until we do that, we're always going to have horrendous financial problems. Until we've made the investment in prevention, that means that fewer cases ending up requiring so much expensive intervention. So I think there are no quick fixes to this, but we've got to invest in prevention work. And that goes across all the different departments of the council, and how we put that together. And my final point is to pick up this point that I think was picked up earlier about the cut to the highways budget. It looks as if we're losing money on the highways budget. And I think, again, that is a false economy in the long term, because our roads will just deteriorate. So, you know, as I read the figures, and I might be wrong, but it looks to me like we've lost more than £1 million out of the highways budget for the coming year. And that's a concern.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. And many of your points are just points well made, really. So thank you. And I always agree with you. It's very, very odd that the requirements on councils, you must produce a balanced budget, but you've got to have it produced and be out to consultation before the government tell you how much money you're going to get. So it seems a bit of an anomaly to me, but there you go. Maybe one's out behind out. That might be that. Stuart, were you just looking across? You're going to come in on a comment there on one of the things that Bob mentioned? Highways budget.
Yeah. Just in terms of how that budget worked last year. Obviously, we set a budget through this process, and then other monies did become available, as has been referenced. You know, the Chancellor does come in every now and again and provide extra funding. So we are still the same budget as we set last year. It was the extra funding, as I understand it, the one-off funding that came in separate to that has been referenced by Bob. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Fiona.
I just wanted to assure Councillor Purser and our other member colleagues that we are working very closely, both Councillor Golby and I, with his portfolio area of public health, to do as much as we possibly can for the early help, because early help is somewhere we all recognise is the answer to all of these problems. But as you've seen from our budget, we haven't got spare capacity at the moment. But I do assure you we're working together to do everything we absolutely can with every penny we can find at the moment to put into this and make a start. As Councillor Randall said, the pilot is meant to be, that's how we start, not that's how we finish. That's going to be the starter, where then we will have outreach places to other areas where we know that the demand is perhaps higher, certainly in Northampton. So it's only the start. We're starting there because we happen to have this building, which has got space, and it's a fairly new building, so it doesn't need too much maintenance, etc. So we are working very hard on that early help offer.
Very good. Thank you. Malcolm, you're going to come back in?
Yeah, just briefly, Bob. Three very, very relevant points. I mean, the council hardship fund is topping up to 150, as you no doubt. Now we'll see where that goes. But current restraints, we thought that was appropriate, you know, for today. And the world will move on, no doubt. We'll see where it goes. The investment in prevention. Now, we've asked this question of the Children's Trust in particular, for obvious reasons, because again, that's very much in our minds. And they talk at great lengths about how that's their efforts, and that's the very point you made. It's the investment being made. So we take them as the word on that. So we'll see where that one goes as well. And the 1.9 million, which you referred to, that was a windfall last year. And we hope we get the same again this year, but we cannot guarantee that. And so I put it to you again, really what I said earlier on. Consider the situation if we didn't have, let's take this financial year now, and we didn't have that 16 million pounds hit, we would have 12 million pounds excess, and nobody in this cabinet, I'm quite sure, will want to see it spent on anything other than those items you've just spoken about, particularly the highways and prevention for children and adults and things like that. So 3 good points, Bob. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our last speaker then is Councillor McCord. Ian.
I'll probably say a lot more on at council when the time comes. Can I just check with Malcolm, please, Chairman? Are you topping up by 150,000, or are you topping up to 150,000 on the Martin, I will get the right answer now.
Through you, Chair, it's by 150,000.
By 100, so that'll bring it to 225.
Well, or depending on what's left at the end of
Yeah,
the year.
okay, yeah. Well, no, the point you see that you mentioned, the average over the 3 years was 151, but the first year was about 35. Then it was about 250,000 to date. It's about been 170, which I think was up to about November, December time. So we probably are more at a rate of 250,000 a year, not 150,000 average.
I made 2 points, but the point is that we'll see where we go. We'll see where they go in the year. But we're concerned now is we don't want a tiger by the tail either. So those are the two. That's the thinking behind that.
So yeah, I appreciate that, and can I just say then thank you for that, because again that will satisfy 2 scrutiny committees, so that's quite useful, as your Rosie will be happy about that as well. Everything that Bob says I agree with, and probably illustrates the point. You can vote whoever you want and later on in the year, but nothing you want to change. The need for 3-year or for multi-year funding is there. It always has been there, and it would be really useful. But any government, and if you can get your incoming government to do this, they need to fix care. Because you want to fix potholes, fix care. If you want to fix leisure centres, fix care. No matter what you want to do in this council, fix care. It's as simple as that. Because that's what's burning through our cash and burning through the cash of every upper tier authority right across the country. And until we have that sorted, we're always going to be in this position. So, and I'll keep saying it, time and time again, because it's dead simple. All our problems can be solved by fixing care. But that's all I'll say now, and I'll say a lot more probably on budget night.
Thank you. And I think you're right. It's probably better to say it's easier to say fixed care than to actually deliver it. But as you know, I've often agreed with that concept. I think you're absolutely right. It's the largest challenging area, but be assured there's a lot of work going on. Did anybody else want to comment now, or ask any questions of Malcolm, or comment on anything that the speakers have raised? Sorry, Adam.
Yeah, but just going back to Councillor Holland-Delamere's comments around contingencies, I always think it's an interesting debate, and a genuinely interesting debate, because it enshrines 2 different philosophies almost. And my view is that on all of the evidence so far in the lifespan of WNC, actually, I think there's strong evidence to show that there's a need for contingencies, and they've served us well thus far. But I await with interest the counter proposal next week.
Okay, jolly good. Any other comments, questions? Any last remarks from you, Malcolm, or are you done?
I'm all done. Thank
you. Yep, brilliant. That's great. Okay, well, that's some excellent comments. Great debate. Recommendations as always are at section 3. Just to remind you, we are adding then that recommendation at an additional 150,000 to be funded one-off earmark reserves for the council tax hardship funds. Can you confirm your agreement to the recommendations? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. Now we're 2 hours in. We have still got a fair bit to cover. Fortunately, I think a lot of the other papers will not have the same level of debate. Nevertheless, I'd like to propose that we take a break, if we may. Sorry? Well, I tell you, I think I'll have energy for item 8 when we come back from break, if you don't mind me saying. So if we may, what is it now? I make it 3 minutes past. Let's aim to start at 15:15. If we can get back for about 10 past, we start at 15:15, if we may, please. Thank you.
very little I can add to it, other than that.
Thank you, Malcolm. Adam, a few comments from you?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to pick out the issue of the 7.7% rent increase, whilst there was broad support in the consultation, I would suggest that that's possibly support from people who aren't themselves tenants of MPH. However, in consultation with senior colleagues at MPH, we felt that there was little option but to pursue the maximum rent increase, given the ever more rigorous regulatory regime that we're going to be subject to, as well as the condition of the housing stock throughout Northampton. We absolutely have to do right by our residents in terms of maintaining and going further with a fit-for-purpose maintenance regime, responding to repair requests on time and quickly, and where they're an emergency, getting out there immediately. And it's only through having that income from rents that we'll be able to do that, given the ring-fence nature of the HRA. So hopefully in years to come, those rent increases will be easier to stomach for tenants. I would also highlight the fact that actually the vast majority of tenants have those rent increases covered by their housing benefit if they're recipients of housing universal credit. And furthermore, NPH will still have its own hardship fund to cover anyone who's got difficulties with paying their rent, and accessing that hardship fund doesn't exclude anyone from accessing the different hardship funds available through the council itself. So there's a range of factors in there that will hopefully mitigate against any significant adverse impact that tenants feel. But I know that by working closely with MPH, they're working ever harder on the way in which they engage with tenants, hear the voices of tenants, and over the past couple of months, and again today, I've been attending a training course with ALMOs and housing associations throughout the country on just how you can most effectively listen to tenants. So that's a piece of work that MPH and I will continue into the future.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you. That's very helpful. We have just one speaker on this, which is Councillor Purser. Bob, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Somewhat worryingly, Councillor Brown has covered almost all the points I was going to make in his but I suppose just to say that from Malcolm's point of view, that the zero figure at the bottom of the revenue account involves a huge amount of peddling and backpedaling and work between officers, both the WNC and MPH, in achieving that. So I think that's a lot of hard work ends up with zero. So there's the 7.7% for understandable reasons, and it does impact on some tenants very seriously, and that's why I welcome the hardship support fund, because that's absolutely vital for them. I mean, there is the issue then of the way universal credit is set up at the moment, almost guarantees some tenants end up in arrears, and impacts on the it does cause a deficit in the income that we get from housing, and that is a real concern. And some government at some stage has got to sort that out, because it's a nonsense. It's designed in to put people in the most difficult situation. Welcome the housing conditions survey, very important piece of information that we all need. That's very welcome, and welcome the support for the funding for that's come in. That is very important. And just to echo the points on the changes to the regulatory framework that we're now in, which is throwing up all sorts of new issues, particularly for MPH in terms of hearing the voice of our tenants, which we are, and putting real pressure on us to improve the quality of our repair service. So we are obviously, MPH is working very hard at that. Um, so, yes, I think those are those are my comments on the revenue bit. If I can just have a go at the capital bit, with your indulgence. Well, we've had lots of challenges here, and I'm not happy with where we are, but we are where we are. And it's still concerning that, the housing needs assessment says we need 150 social houses. We're producing 80 at best. So we're still not really getting that right. The reason, and it's important that it's social housing, not affordable housing. And the reason we need social housing is because we have a significant number of our workers in this town who are in the lower quartile. Their income is around 20,000 a year. They therefore need social housing if they're not to spend more than 25% on their budget on housing, which is seen as a reasonable amount to spend on housing. So if we're going to carry on having low-income industries in our town, we've got to have the social housing for people to live in. That's probably enough for me tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you very much indeed. I think that demonstrates we're on the same page in many ways, doesn't it? Anything that either Adam or Malcolm wanted to pick up from the comments there? Malcolm, over to you.
I just make a brief response to Bob there on the zero, a lot of hard work. I know. Tell me, Bob, and you're very fortunate in that we deal from time to time with Phil, as you know, and you've got a very competent man there, and clearly a good crew to perform as he helps you on. So I can well understand, but you can always set your clock by it, and that's very, very good, very rare. Appreciate the effort.
Thanks, Malcolm. Adam.
Yeah, I thank Councillor Purser for his comments. He always speaks extremely thoughtfully on housing issues, so I'm grateful for his comments on the question of social rents. We're always going to come up against the issue of viability. I will take that comment and that suggestion back to the team to see if any of the current projects can be looked at afresh, to see if a social rent is possible. However, with the current land values, current purchase costs, current build costs, I can only envisage it being extremely difficult, if not impossible. So that's precisely why we've gone to building almost exclusively affordable rent accommodation over the past few years. I think when it's a question of affordable rents or no houses or fewer houses, then there's only one way to go. Although I appreciate that. I get what he's saying.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions on this? No? Okay. Thank you to everybody. In which case, recommendations at section 3 is suggesting what we might recommend to council. If we're happy to approve that, is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Okay, takes us then on to item 10, period 9, General Fund and Housing Revenue Account Capital Monitoring Reports. Malcolm will introduce in a moment, after which we've got 3 speakers, councillors Holland, Delamere, Purser and Randall. Malcolm, over to you.
Thanks. Well, most of what's here has already been said, and that is the budget is looking like being balanced year end, as I've already spoken about. So the important point in this report is again not the capital forecast in the long term, but the rephasing of sundry projects. That is what this report, and somewhat of a technical report in that regard. So it's rephasing of capital projects and a year-end outlook, which is as we've come to expect, and recognise the work, Bob, and as a balanced budget. So there's no more to be said as far as I can see. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Malcolm. Let's go over to our speakers then, and we welcome first of all Councillor Holland Delamere. You're happy, Keith? Thank you very much indeed. In which case, Bob, is there anything you want? I think you started to touch on it, didn't you? That's great. Thank you very much. In which case, Councillor Randall, Wendy, we're over to you.
Right, I'll be very quick. I've only got one point on here, and it's on the general fund under assets and management budget for Northamptonshire holistic flood resilience. We've seen billing underwater twice now in the last 6 weeks. Councillor Nunn, I saw a statement from yourself saying that we can't allow this to keep happening, and there needs to be a sustainable long-term solution to address this. Is the proposal within the budget to address this issue? And how are you going to protect this area in future and any other areas that we see frequent flooding in residential areas and highways? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's come, no, sorry, that you were the last speaker, so let's come back to that. I'll make a quick comment on that, which is that we've seen, major incidents in terms of flooding. It is an increasingly frequent thing. There could be a number of reasons for that. One, as you know, I believe in sustainability and climate change, and I think we need to consider that. But this is a really difficult challenge, and if the answer was that easy, we would have done it. So we don't know what the answer is. We need to work with Environment Agency and so on. The answer will not be obvious. This is a floodplain. Nevertheless, we have committed, and we reiterate here, that we'll be forming with partners such as the Environment Agency, a task group to look at every possibility in terms of how we might better mitigate the dreadful situation and the future likelihood of that happening, particularly at Billing Aquadome. I think it's as simple as that. That we have not suddenly, as a result of the 2 recent floods in the last couple of months, or the last sort of six weeks, we have not, as a result, suddenly added more budget. I think if you could find a solution for this, it would probably be such a massive project, potentially a capital one. There'd be responsibilities with Environment Agency as well. That to make a knee-jerk reaction on budget would not be the answer. The big thing is the thinking to work out what on earth you do when you have so many homes, park homes, let's say, within a floodplain area. But that doesn't deflect at all from how serious we are to try and find a solution to it. That was the key point that was raised there. Are there any other points or queries or anything that anybody'd like to raise on this one? No, Malcolm.
I'll make a brief comment. This is period 9, so it certainly wouldn't be in here. I mean, we're nearly end of the year, and this is a long term. You look actually through this. It says clear as 50,000 here, 50,000. Anything down in Billing isn't going to be 50,000. It's going to be a very big number. Stuart will probably give a better idea of me, but it'll have an awful lot of noughts behind it. So it's not in this paper.
Yeah, I think Stuart might have some comments. Thanks, Malcolm.
No, just to reiterate basically what's been said at the start, we wouldn't seek to put a budget in until we actually knew what solutions, if any, there were available. And I think, well, hopefully we'll get those discussions going very quickly. But I do think, given the scale of the issue, that any solutions we do come forward with would require some sort of central government help and support in what we do. So it really is about bringing all of the partners, bringing government, etc., into that task group. But initially, we need to just understand what we've got there in terms of the problem and whether there's any solutions that are apparent to all of those players who all through the weekend were on the calls at 3 in the morning, 5 in the morning. We've got so much knowledge now. We need to bring that knowledge together and hopefully we'll start to identify some direction of travel. Just too early at the moment to really articulate what that means in budgetary terms.
Thank you, Stuart. Fiona?
Nothing to do with the budget really, but I just wanted to put on record the huge work that our fantastic emergency team put into this to actually rescue all those people, many of which were elderly, some very unwell, children, families, and the work that they did, which as Cabinet we all knew on the emergency WhatsApp group that told us what they were doing was fantastic. So I think they need to be highly commended from this Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you for raising that. It's great effort. Our own staff, including staff from both West and Northants, all of the sort of emergency services, the Red Cross, and then the volunteer groups like the 4x4 group and so on. So many people. I would have missed some off that list, but it gives you an example of how wide that was. And yes, let's take a moment just to reflect and record formally our thanks to them. Thank you, Fiona. Malcolm wanted to make another point.
Yeah, there is a note in the forward capital plan on 362. I think I'm right in saying that, yeah. But there's up to five and a bit million. By looking at it, there's £1 million in the short term. That would really, again, I looked to Stuart that we get an assessment for that. You won't get any more than that for it. I mean, that to my mind looks I mean, I know it's a big number, but it's a small number to me for what we're looking at there. So that's somebody's put a finger in the air, I'd say.
Okay, thank you. That's great. So on this one, the recommendations are unusually at section 2. If there's no further points, I think I'll just ask the Cabinet to indicate if your agreement to those recommendations. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Takes us on to item 11. This is provision of an environmental enforcement contract to supplement the work of the environmental crime team. I think in short, taking the Northampton arrangement and widening it across the area. David, in a moment, will introduce the report. Then we have two speakers, which are Councillor Beardsworth and Councillor Randall. So, David, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose is to seek approval to seek tenders for a new environmental enforcement contract for the whole of the West. At the moment, the contract we have just covers Northampton. We're looking for this contract to allow a third-party contractor to issue FPNs or fixed penalty notices for environmental crime on behalf of the council. The contract is proposed to be on a concession basis, the delivery of the contract being funded by receipts from fixed penalty notices issued and a portion of the income coming to the council. This is a cost-effective method for complementing the work already carried out by the in-house team of neighbourhood wardens. The contract will include appropriate safeguards to ensure the arrangement does not expose the council to any financial risk. The service will operate across the whole of West Northamptonshire, as I've said, providing a consistent approach to deal with littering and enforcement of dog control, PSPO orders, etc. As we all know, the FPNs are an effective means of dealing with environmental crime. Obviously with these patrols going across the whole of the West, we'll have a much better and higher visibility for those that decide not to tidy up behind themselves. We will have an extensive communications program carried out prior to the commencement of the new service, so people are aware. This provision of a low-level enforcement service will have a positive impact on environmental crime across the area and will help us all live our best life. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. So we've two speakers. Let's go first of all to Councillor Beardsworth. Sally, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I think this brings us back to what Councillor Purser was saying. We're going to an outside company because I had a chat with our finance director officer about why we're going outsourcing and not doing it in-house. And he said, well, we pay people more money, so therefore we can't, it's cheaper for us to outsource it because they don't pay their staff as much. And I just thought, hang on a minute, aren't we trying to improve the lives of people that live around us? Aren't we trying to make this not a poor-waged society? And if we pay people a bit more, then they probably achieve better accommodation. These people, who work for this company will probably be in the £20,000 a year bracket, if that. And I'm just concerned that we are not thinking, we're just thinking financially rather than morally about this situation. And I know it's all about saving money, and I know we have a budget, and I know we have difficult decisions to make, but people need help to get good jobs. And if it's in-house, people with talent could be found and moved up through the order, become managers, become heads of departments. Who knows what their capabilities are? We'll never know because this is outsourced and we don't have any dealings with them. And I just think it's it's going against all the ethos of actually trying to make sure that people in Northamptonshire have a decent wage and a decent job and prospects and a place to live that they can afford. And that's all I'm going to say. I just feel that we're letting down a certain level of people that we could be helping better by bringing this in-house. So that's all I've got to say on the matter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sally. So Councillor Randall, Wendy.
Thank you. It says the team would work across the whole of West Northants. And I'm just wondering if the town council and parish councils have been spoken to about this proposal to understand if it is needed in their area or required. So that's the first question. What people do want to see is frequent offenders being punished. You do find that an area that is kept clean and tidy is less likely to see rubbish thrown. Can you share the cleaning schedule for the areas that you're proposing to target? How much would the fine be? How do they identify the offender? What stops the person giving a false name and address? And if the person refuses to give any details, what happens then? It states in the report how many fines have been issued, but it doesn't state how that is measured against the improved look of the town. Thank you.
Jolly good. Thank you. Ian, did I see your hand go up? Come on, let's
I too am a bit of a loss as to why we're not doing this in-house. And the budget that we just passed, contained within that, there's a £300,000 provision for increased revenue from the fixed penalty charges that the council hopes to gain by ensnaring motorists for driving in a yellow junction box or going through a no right turn sign or whatever. So we could do that enforcement in-house. So the principle of enforcing these things in-house is established. And now this one we're going to outsource. And I also found from reading the report that the level of tickets that were being issued seemed to me to be woefully inadequate. Are you trying to tell me there's no litter being dropped around? There's no dog poop on the pavements. We all know that these things happen. And to my mind, I don't understand at any level of pay how this would not be, with a bit of effort, how you would not actually have a good deterrent and a sensible income stream. I appreciate if any of these things work properly, there would be no income because everybody would abide by the rules and you couldn't budget for anything. But I just really don't understand why we're not looking at doing this in-house and working, unlike street wardens, and working with people within parish councils or and others to actually, allow these powers to be passed out. If somebody in every parish council was allowed to do the neighbouring parish, it might be difficult in their own parish. That might be quite useful in areas like along my ward, along the Grand Union Canal. There's things like that where I'm sure you see the offenders. I used to see people who used to particularly grind my gears when I sat in this office and looked at the back, and there was one woman would turn up with a bright yellow sou'wester and 3 Dalmatians, and she never picked up one of their parcels on the water meadows. And it used to always annoy me. But we know these people exist, and we should be. I don't understand at all why we don't do it in-house. That's all.
Okay, we could get you a ticket book as well, Ian, if that was helpful. Yeah. Oh, I see. I think some of this, but maybe we'll tackle that one first. I think we've made an assessment of the options. I think some of this is not just about the employment of the people, but the processing of the fines and tickets and so on, isn't it? Anybody want to chip in and add a little more? Phil, are you going to cover that?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, you and I both know that this was a scheme that was part of the old Northampton Borough Council organisation, and you and I were both involved in it. I welcome it going out to contract again, and I welcome it being West Northamptonshire wide. I think we recognised that we had significant problems with doing this work through our wardens. The wardens were not delivering on this aspect of work. They do a fantastic job looking at fly tips and dealing with the big stuff, but the small stuff, catching people, dropping litter, dog fouling, whatever it may be, wasn't the top of their priority. And we would get, the public were really concerned about litter and everything. And consequently, that's why we went, and of course, Mike knows all about this as well. That's why we went out to separate tender for a separate contract, purely and simply to do with these smaller aspects of environmental crime, leaving the wardens to get on with the big stuff where they've had real good success in securing significant prosecutions. So I'm all for this. I think to bring it in-house, I think would be very expensive with regard to overheads. I think it would deter from the focus of going out there and issuing fist penalty notices for minor offences. They would get dragged into other work. And I think that this is something we really need to focus on. And I have to say, I work closely with David on this. Fly tips and litter is my responsibility. The enforcement is down to David. But it is something, I mean, I've had requests from members in Brackley and Toaster and Daventry asking when this is going to be introduced, particularly dog fouling and things like that. So, all for it, Chairman. I think it's the way to go. Let's get some enforcement and let's try and put a stop to the problem of litter as best we possibly can.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Phil. Fiona, you wanted to comment, I think?
Well, just to say how pleased I am that irrespective of whether it's in or out of house, that's something that obviously in your portfolios you've looked into carefully, I'm sure. But what I was going to say is I'm really pleased, as you know, I'm going to say that this is one of many initiatives that's actually bringing our district together. And I'm sure, I know that, as you say, that my area will be exceedingly pleased to be thought to be part of our district. And I'm sure those people in Daventry will be equally pleased to know they are part of West Northants. Because as you know, the focus, according to them, is only Northampton. And this is one of the initiatives, many we're doing to make sure those people feel included in our district as well. So I'm pleased that that's coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you for your comments.
I think you need to be clear that this complements the wardens that we've already got. Their focus, as Phil has said, is absolutely on these FPNs. To address some of the questions from Councillor Randall, town and parish councils is based on intelligence. So the intelligence comes back to us, then we would then send the A team in to be on the lookout. So, we need to work with the parish councils and the town councils. And of course, that's going to be something new to the West because it's a provision they didn't have previously. So hence the detail in the communication approach. Yes, someone could give a false name. Yeah, we can't, we can't cover that off unless everybody has to carry an ID card, etc., etc. Where do you start with that? The fines generally are 150 quid, but they could be up to £500. So significant fines. Sally, your comments reference the morals of paying people, etc., etc. If people didn't drop litter, didn't have their dogs dumping on our footpaths, then there's the morals there. The in-house provision, there just isn't the economies of scale to make that work. So something we do look at. But do remember, this is a no cost to the council, which is very important. And these people, they're out there to catch people dropping the litter, not clearing up behind their dogs. It's an important part of our. I didn't miss your point. We have to be the protector of the public purse. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments from anybody at all? No? Okay, thank you. In which case, recommendations of section 3, just indicate, if you would please, your agreement. Is that agreed? Thank you. Takes us on to item 12. This one is with Malcolm. This is the future use of the County Hall site. Following Malcolm's introduction, we have Councillor Beardsworth and Councillor Randall, who also will include some comments from Councillor Roberts. So Malcolm, over to you to open up on this one.
Thanks, Chair. Well, the report's quite clear cut, I'd like to think. If you look at the executive summary, I think that introduced it very well. I'm not going to read through that lot. It's all there. Oh no, read it. And the important point is on this one, I think, is you then got to refer to paragraphs 513 and 518. It's on page 385. And that gives a set of ideas of what the current thinking is. But I think that I'm not going to say too much about that because you can all read it for yourself. You can also probably two important points here. And the first is that nobody's selling the at all. We haven't got that in mind. What we've got is short or long-term leases, long-term preferably. But that'll come out in the wash. We'll see what happens. And also that it's currently costing us £500,000 just to keep it open for very limited purposes. And we clearly need to do something about that. I'm sure we'd all want to see something done with it. Now, you can all consider what those items should be. And this list is by no means definitive. Any good ideas are gratefully received. We might hear some tonight. But that's the broad thrust of where we're going at the moment. And the objective is to use it to the best of our ability. I say all good ideas are gratefully received, but that's the current thing. That's about it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Malcolm. That's helpful. Just one small correction. The former constabulary block was a possible consideration disposal by freehold. I think the key thing is, though, leasehold is the main perceived sort of solution here. I think there's the bigger picture here. And we have two obligations. One is about historic buildings and maintaining buildings. One is about valued money for the taxpayer. And what I think this does, if we get this right, and this only sets a process going, it gives no final solution. But if we get it right, we do both. We take some of the most beautiful buildings in the centre of Northampton, which for ages have just decayed, and we've sunk taxpayer money into them now just to keep afloat buildings where we have serious obligations as listed buildings, and there's been absolutely no benefit. There's been precious little use of them, and they just continue to decay. If we get this right, we will achieve both. We will achieve our value for money obligations to the taxpayer, but we'll also bring those beautiful historic buildings back into the life of the town. They'll serve purpose for people and so on, whether part of it is homes or whether there's other things. I still believe in the sessions houses and the jail cells and so on. We've got the most marvellous historic asset, which I'd like to see as a greater visitor experience, but nevertheless, that's further down the line. But if we get this right, we will achieve both the value and pay a little more respect to these wonderful historic buildings. But let's go over at that point to our speakers, the first of which is Councillor Beardsworth. Sally.
Thank you, Chair. I recently paid a visit to Grimsby, and I went to their town hall, and they said, would you like a tour? And they've done wonderful things with their town, their town hall. They've made it a tourist attraction. They've actually got people to go in and you pay and you go around, and there's all the history of Grimsby, the fishing industry, all the other bits that go with it, things that I didn't even know existed. And it was a wonderful experience. And I feel sure we could do something like that with part of County Hall. It's a wonderful building. It's so different to anything we've got anywhere else. It would be a wonderful place to put the Tourist Information Office and the First Stop Shop, if we could put it in there, because I think that would be really central for people to go to. There are accommodations you could use. The judges' chambers could be used for accommodation, but I'd like to see it more done for key workers rather than private expensive flats that most people in Northampton couldn't afford. So I believe there is a lot of things that we could do with it, and I know it is in a poor state of repair. But when you actually look back at the history of this, we built Angel Square, and then we sold it, and now we're renting it back at an exorbitant cost every year. And we've left, and there wasn't a plan for County Hall. And that was so wrong. And I'm sure you agree with me on that, because basically you don't just transfer everybody from one department to another and then just leave it to into decline. So I do feel that, there should have been more forward planning and something more thought about in the county hall, rather than where we are now. We're trying to save a building that's falling into dilapidation, that's got a lot of problems, and it's very difficult to actually segregate off. But I think we could do certain things with it. I mean, the courtyard itself is a beautiful area. And, there are so many things there that could be put to the advantage of the town for the people. I'm not against anything, but what I'm saying is basically it's still got to in part belong to the people of Northamptonshire, because it's their building. And I think we mustn't forget that, just because decisions in the past made us build Angel Square, which I was never for, to be honest with you, because it was an awful lot of money. But we are where we are, and we can't change that. But if we can actually do something constructive with it, rather than just sell it off, or, some homes, something different. Have a look at Grimsby. It's on the town. I'm sure the councils have done the same. It's well worth looking at, and it's a revenue maker as well. So you're not going to lose money. You're going to, and it was just so interesting to go in and have a look round. So please bear these things in mind, and try and keep the lease we put on it not too long, so that in future years we might be able to get it back into its normal place. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sally. I'll take a look at Grimsby. Right, so Councillor Randall, Wendy, over to you.
All right, thank you. I'll be quick. Right, this is what Emma's sent through and asked if I could read on her behalf. The disposal of County Hall and Judges' Lodgings is the latest in a long line of proposed public sell-offs. We are passing off publicly owned heritage assets to the highest bidders on long leaseholds. It's the same as asset stripping, but you are retaining the freehold to help ease your conscience that you are not actually selling this off. Northampton's heritage is being sold down the rivers by years of Tory mismanagement of the council estate. Why does this Grade 2 listed property need so much work now? Because for years, none of you have bothered to take care of it. That was Emma. So I found this report quite difficult to read, and I was flicking backwards and forwards across the pages, trying to actually understand exactly what was being said. So in 5.7, it says that a maintenance backlog is estimated at 4.5 million. So, and if we're going to do something or sell that off, or, are we proposing that we spend any of that money, or are we going to sell it off knowing, that there's 4.5 million's worth of repairs? It also says in there about, turning it into flats, but somewhere else in the report, it says about the heating, and it would be extremely difficult. The heating's not effective, and it would be extremely difficult to put anything else in. So I just found that I was flicking backwards and forwards the whole time. But similar to what Sally had said, the National Justice Museum in Nottingham is very similar to what we have with its courtrooms and, and its prison cells and things, and they charge £10 a ticket. Haven't read anywhere in the report that we're looking at doing anything like that at all. And as for Judges' Lodgings and going into a hotel, have we looked at running it as a hotel ourselves? But yeah, it was just a very difficult report to read. I felt I just really didn't understand exactly what we were, if we're going to spend any money or not, basically.
Okay, I mean, a couple of those things I can let you know about. I won't respond to phrases like asset stripping and easing conscience and so on. I just don't think they deserve a response. I've had meetings and conversations with National Justice Museum, and I think that's a great proposal. That's one thing that I would love to see. So those things aren't being ruled out. And I think there's almost a suggestion here that you should have all the answers and it should all be taken care of. I think if we had the final answers, you would quite rightly accuse us of this all being a stitch-up job, dark rooms and all the rest of it. So it's not. What we are agreeing here is that we'll move forward towards the sort of proposals that you see, but they all require more work. And in terms of do we paint this first or do we do that later? We don't know the answers to that. You're just looking for simple solutions that don't exist. This is a more complex arrangement than that. But what this does is give us permission to proceed with those arrangements. Does anybody else want to comment either on any of the comments made or raise any other issues? Actually, see Ian's hand going up as well. Let's take Ian first, and then I think Stuart and Malcolm would be keen to come in. Ian?
I just wonder, should I read anything into the fact that when you look at the medium-term financial forecast that we've just agreed to in the budget, there's nothing in there for any capital asset disposals? Does that say there's little confidence in this plan?
Malcolm?
What we've got here, the whole objective of this tonight is just to kick it into the park. There's no specifics here. It's just some ideas. And we're looking to say, right, we've got this substantial building. It's costing us $500,000 a year. We're doing virtually nothing. What are we going to do? And we're very keen to hear good ideas. That's the point. And if there are good ideas and we say, well, we'll do that, then there's got to be a business plan to follow. There's no blank checks here. So it's a business plan to follow, and some will come through and some won't, and we'll see how we get on.
And in addition, we have 900,000 in the budget just passed, which I think is for the roof. But by trying to, I tried to marry up the 900,000, I think that was in the report, with the 900,000 that was in the budget report.
Well,
So I think that's to repair the roof. But if we're going to do it, are we going to spend that money and let somebody else be the beneficiary, or are we going to do it? The ultimate irony, of course, is that as a listed building, this council has a legal obligation and legal powers to compulsory purchase listed buildings if they're falling into disrepair.
I mean, that would be an excellent, excellent paperwork exercise to chase.
We hadn't planned on that way.
Yes, there's no line in the budget for that, and I think it's I think it's one thing having confidence in the plan. And I have complete confidence in this plan, but I don't present it's a plan that's got all the answers. What would be really wrong would be to sit here and say we've put a line in the budget that says we're going to get X £100,000 from this year, because I don't think we can tell that for certain. We're at that early stage. Now, a couple of people wanted to come in, which I had in the following order, if I may. Stuart, I think you were going to make a comment where you're, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And again, reiterating some of the issues that have just been put forward. It is a complex site. We have done some soft market testing, and therefore we have information from the market in terms of some of the opportunities that are available and where we think we can maximize the best use as well as public use within the site. Just reference figure 5.18 that talks about the Sessions House. And again, these uses would work alongside emerging proposals to have guided tours of the courts and cells, engaging with people with a history of justice in Northamptonshire. So again, just referencing some of the ideas are already within our thinking and already articulated within the report. In terms of the money to be spent, again, I think we've got to look at what the procurement, the disposal through leasehold looks like. We need to understand that opportunity to protect the buildings. Is it in our best interest for us to invest in the property? Or is it best use that we actually work with whoever the prospective end user is for them to do the works? The availability of grants is a big opportunity. There are some grants that the council can access. There are other grants that it's better that community or other developers, if you like, can access. So as has been identified by Councillor Longley there, this is moving forward into those bigger discussions, if you like, to understand what the best opportunities are to, as you said right at the very start, best use of these buildings and the best retention of what is fantastic historical fabric and the DNA of Northampton.
Thank you. Stuart, thank you. Malcolm, do you want to come in next?
No, I said what I had to say.
Okay, thanks. In which case, Adam, over to you.
Yeah, just having a little look on the North East Lincolnshire Council website and Grimsby Town Hall visitor attraction. It seems quite similar to the the Justice Museum type initiative that you're pursuing, Leader, that they charge £3.50 for an admission. And the rest of the building seems to be turned over to weddings and venue hire, which of course in Northampton, we have a facility just opposite the road which does exactly that. So I think we're clearly at a stage where all options are on the table. Tonight's paper widens those options, so I see no reason why we shouldn't go ahead. The fact that it's leasehold offers the council and its heritage assets huge protections versus any proposed freehold, which is where I think a lot of the excitement around this is misplaced.
Okay, thank you. But again, we're on that same page, Sally, I think. Sorry.
Just one more thing to add. I've been messaged by Councillor Nigel Hinch, who is going to Grimsby on Saturday, and he's promised to take a look at Grimsby Town Hall and report back with further information.
Excellent. See how dynamic things happen around here, Sally, yeah? It's okay. He might take one of his buses. You could go in, possibly. Right, let's get back on track here. Okay, anybody else have any other comments on this, which is, where are we? Item 12, future use of County Hall. Any other comments to add? Have we covered everybody's comments? Okay, thank you. In which case, recommendations at section 3, can you please indicate your agreement to the recommendations? Is that agreed? Fantastic. Thank you very much. Takes us on to item 13. This is hosting the functions of the South East Midlands Local Enterprise Partnership. I'll introduce the report in a second, following which we have two speakers, which is first of all, Councillor Beardsworth and then Councillor Purser. Keep the introduction fairly brief. These are really, really important services. If any of you have dealt with or come across businesses who have dealt with the Growth Hub, you'll know that many people put their success and the sustainability of their business, that is to say, the fact that it's still going, down to the support they've had from the Growth Hub, the great services. The Careers Hub is a service currently delivered by SEMLEP, South East Midlands Local Enterprise Partnership, which puts schools in touch with employers to create world-class work experience opportunities, deals with economic strategy and so on. But the government agenda has been to move away from LEPs. We've had to wait a little to find out what's happening here. To some extent, a gradual decline. Sadly, that's seen the loss of some of the staff at SEMLEP. However, we've clarity now, and government announcements tell us that the funding for LEPs will cease at the end of March this year. Arrangements are to transfer across to democratically elected local authorities. I think we feel that the SEMLEP operation has worked well. We like those services. We wanted to take a review at what's worked really well and perhaps what we might look to modify. But there has been agreement between the 6 councils that constitute the South East Midlands that these services should continue. As a result of which, the offer came for which councils wanted to host these services. 2 of us put our names forward. That was West Northants Council and the other was Luton. Both councils traditionally very committed to these services. Both councils have the 2 enterprise zones that exist within the South East Midlands. Two excellent proposals came forward. Ours was chosen as being the favoured expression of interest to host these services. Luton had a lot of merit. We liked what they put in about engaging with businesses, and that has been translated into the final model for engaging with businesses. So why West Northants? I think we take the attitude that these services are important. Economic development is an area we're putting a lot of emphasis on. We've recruited senior people to move into that area and the team is expanding. We are the largest council, certainly by population, within the South East Midlands. So we are larger than Milton Keynes, the Bedfordshire councils and North Northants. So for all these reasons, we felt we could hold our hand up and be the ones to deliver this service well. The model is that they won't be quite the same as they were, but largely we're preserving those main key services, particularly the Growth Hub and the Careers Hub being the 2 main ones, the economic strategy and so on. These services will not be run at a profit, but the council will charge a management fee, which will mean that our costs are covered. So as a consequence, we can deliver services in our own area, across to Luton as cost effectively, with liabilities being shared should they crop up with other councils. On the other hand, benefits or income or whatever it might be being shared with those other councils too. We're in a hurry to do this. We're looking also at renaming, given that the LEP phrase, Local Enterprise Partnership, is no longer part. We may not have a new name for these services as quickly as possible. The governance will go through, whereas the SEMLEP board and the LEP boards were both public sector and business led. This comes under the control of the local authorities, the 6 local authorities that constitute SEMLEP, currently described as being what we call the Central Area Growth Board. We will be changing the governance arrangements so that we have a joint committee, which a little like the joint committee we work with North Northants Council over shared services, will give us the advantage of good governance. And we'll be forming a business advisory board, a business board that will be made up of businesses. We'll be looking to recruit senior businesses so that we can hear the voice of business. Those proposals have been discussed with the likes of the Chamber and the FSB. They're quite happy with the way that those arrangements seem to be emerging. So in short, the recommendations then are asking us to continue, we're looking for approval to continue, to accept the transfer of staff. The TUPE work has been underway and so on, and other things, including accountable body status. The other local authorities are also taking a similar form of decision through be it their cabinet, their council, or delegated if their constitution allows them to, so that we can get all this completed, ready for these services to come live our way from the 1st of April. That's largely what we have to say on that. We're happy to take now our speakers. Councillor Beardsworth, Sally, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm very pleased that SEMLEP are coming to us. I think it's a move forward. I have no problems with it at all. I've just got one slight risk because the council is still in transformational mode. Hopefully it won't delay that progress. And that's all that was our concern, is the transformational way that we're moving, and then you're getting another body in. So it was just that was all the concern we had. Okay.
No, that makes complete sense. I think we can assure you that won't be the case. There should be no case. We're talking about a relatively modest number of staff. It's not hundreds and hundreds, but no, we can give you that assurance. It will not affect the transformation going on elsewhere.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sally. Welcome, Bob. Over to you.
Yes, thank you. Very much welcome this proposal. It puts us at the centre of our regional grouping, and that's a really good thing. If we're looking forward to better relationships with central government and devolution of powers, it will put us in a really strong position. I suppose from a narrow point of view, just ask how can we really make sure we maximise the benefits in terms of investment in our economy in this area? How do we make sure that having them based with us, we get the maximum sort of bang for our bucks really in this situation? You know, for example, you know, we're very good at building big boxes, but are we developing the technology that goes into the boxes? Because it seems to me there'll be fewer people going into the boxes. Therefore, we need to have the skills to build the equipment, to manage the systems that go into our distribution centres. And similarly, very important, we train our young people to meet the needs of our economy. And this could be a really important way of making sure that we're really gearing up our colleges and the university to meet the needs of the local economy. So I just want to make sure that we get the maximum benefit from this real opportunity.
Thank you, Bob. And I think you're absolutely right. SEMLEP have done some great work, and I know through my association with them, all of those sorts of things, developing the skills that employers need to deliver well-paid jobs and so on. And as you say, absolutely, we're committed to ensuring that all councils, and naturally our own in West Northants, benefit from the ongoing arrangements. Sorry, Ian, yes, over to you.
What's the current legal status of SEMLEP? Because I thought it was a company limited by guarantee.
Yeah, that's correct. So there's a winding down of the
So,
company to be
and
done.
Are we picking up the cost then of the wind down and things like them dissolving their lease for their Cranfield operation?
No, we pick up no costs other than what are shared. Semlep carries reserves of different types. And so we've set an initial budget which relies on using some of those reserves and also those reserves to cover costs, redundancies, or of which actually there is only one on the redundancy. So we won't come out any worse off than the rest of the councils who actually don't want to put a penny into this either. Reserves will cover all such termination costs, if you like.
But if I read the report correctly, we are 2Ping in their staff.
Correct.
We're taking their cash and their reserves.
Yep.
For the next year.
Mm.
And during that year, we're going to sort out what we're going to do in year 2. So we need to have a plan, because otherwise then presumably the costs of if we can't make it work financially, we've now got half a dozen extra staff that may or may not have a long-term future.
Yeah, and so that those reserves need to ensure that we're always on the right side with 2P responsibilities that we are taking over. And I think there is still some doubt as to what the funding model under the new arrangements would be. We know that the funding has reduced from the government under the LEP arrangements. It's slightly unclear as to what the funding will be in the future. So we have to monitor continually, because there might come a point where we have to say, right, we either strip the services right back or we only run them to a certain date, because that's how long the reserves money lasts. Or we say to councils, if you're really enjoying these services and you think they're fantastic, you're going to have to chip a couple £100,000 a year in or something like that. It has been a priority to the other councils who are looking to reduce costs that they don't suddenly start making big investments per year. They don't create a new line in their budget for, you might remember the relatively modest 20,000 a year councils were previously paying. There's not that investment coming in anymore. Is there anything to add to that, Stuart? Sorry.
You also mentioned joint committee and the Central Area Growth Board. So is the Central Area Growth Board going to become a joint committee?
Yeah, that's the proposal.
And is it still going to be looking at the Central Area Growth Board, certainly from the times that I was, and then everybody that sat around the table that I sat at, the big fear that everybody had was that it was a big game of pass the parcel, particularly, and the person holding the prize got the 10,000, 20,000 houses when the music stopped playing. So is that Central Area Growth Board still going to be looking at particularly growth, housing growth and other growth that was being looked at on the Oxford-Cambridge ARC ideas?
Yes, I suppose from the perspective that it will have a remit over those things. There is also now pan-regional partnership, which is, if you like, the latest iteration. You know, you and I have lived through a number of different iterations of what the Oxford or Cambridge ARC might be. The pan-regional partnership is government funded. It has money, it has a number of work streams going on. We're trying to make strong representation that the central area had been seen as the poor relation, but it's the biggest part of the whole Oxford to Cambridge economy. You know, sort of stuff that you and I have discussed on several occasions. I think the sort of housing agenda, the remit has been far less for the Central Area Growth Board. One of the discussion points has been, we've had elections, obviously, so we had a couple of leader changes from some of the other councils, such as Central Beds and Bedford. Part of the discussion has been anticipating devolution and knowing that broadly there's been a government agenda. In fact, you know, even if we got a change of agenda, both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party seem to be pursuing that devolution agenda. The terms of reference on any discussion or any vote around devolution is that we would need a unanimous vote to move to a devolution bid at all. The government don't seem to be considering what they call the stage 2 devolution, which doesn't have the elected mayor. So far, their only interest has been where there has been an elected mayor, you know, in other words, reviewing applications. There's no appetite amongst the 6 council leaders or the 6 administrations of the SEMLEP authorities to go for the elected mayor model, not at this stage.
I could fancy being the mayor of SEMLEP.
Yeah, well, you know, I could see you doing that, but well, maybe I'll have a word with them, see if they'll change their minds. But meantime, we have to have a unanimous vote of all 6 to move ahead on a devolution. One of the things we have to do is to change perhaps voting arrangements so that some of the day-to-day business that we'll now be taking on can go through a little more on a unanimous vote.
But my concern would be with any joint committee.
Yeah.
A majority decision within that joint committee is binding on all members of that joint committee.
Yeah.
So other councils could then be quite literally
dumping stuff in our council's area, and that was always the concerns that everybody had, that every authority would say, well, why don't we put this housing in the neighbouring authority, and so on and so forth. So, but if you move to that model, I would be rather concerned that is a huge danger. So
yeah, I don't think.
what I'll watch.
Stuart, would you help me with a comment on this? I'm not quite sure.
No, I think that's certainly, since I've been involved in this model, the planning, the local plan side of things has been not on the agenda for the Central Area Growth Board. It's been purely around the economics, and the economic potential through SEMLEP is been its main focus. So, and I think that's sort of recognised in the pushback from the old Ox Cambridge arc, where there was a suggestion in its early days it was all about the housing, and that was very clear when I first arrived, that was not in anybody's interest to pursue that particular agenda, and therefore I think it's been organised, and its remit is, as I say, all around the economic side, very much aligned to SEMLEP and what that can do and achieve. Again, the only other thing I would say is that the main conduit between government and councils for economic growth is through the LEP scenario. So I think that's another reason why we would probably be, I think, the only authority or group of authorities in the whole country who didn't have that organisation in place. So, but just to give you confidence that we've gone through all of the questions you've asked are the questions that have been asked, and happy to sit down in a room with colleagues and take you through that detail, and any other member should they wish.
And finance team have looked closely at things like the 2P obligations and all of the things that you're saying about longer term debt liabilities and so on. So we're reasonably happy that we're bulletproof on that, and we are in no worse a situation than the other councils. So if we continue to monitor both the government funding and the reserves of SEMLEP as they're used, we know early enough if this is not working out and we need to backpedal. Sorry, Anna, I hadn't seen your hand there.
I was just going to add, because I think Ian asked two questions. So there's one is the transfer of them to us now and the liabilities, but the other thing is there is a separate reserve in SEMLEP, which has always been there for in case it's ever wound up permanently. So going back to your point, if we transfer over the 20+ staff, they come over to us, and then in a year's time, it all falls to pieces. There is still a reserve to cover all those redundancies, pension liabilities, and all those other things, which will be maintained, and all the partners have agreed needs to be.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Okay, any other comment? Oh, sorry, Fiona. Yes, over.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, first of all, I was waving to indicate Anna, but thank you very much. I'd love to just say that I'm welcoming the fact that some in shape or form it is going to be continuing. And obviously I can only speak on the areas that come into my portfolio. And I'm very supportive of the work that they've done with our schools, college and university in order to make sure that we've got the right skills in our young people to fulfill the jobs that we have available. But what I'm going to say now is we had enormous support from SEMLEP members at our recent breakfast brunch that we did to get our SEND children into work, because we do know in order to thrive in our district and live their best lives, they need to leave school and get a job. So we've had enormous feedback come from that, which we were collating at the moment. This is obviously not me, it's the royal we of the team. And we will be presenting that to the next SEND Improvement Board. But that room was buzzing, as you well know, Leader, and we had a lot of SEMLEP support in that as well. So very good to see that they're broadening their horizons to include all of our young people.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Fiona. I think there's a lot more we can capitalise on in terms of the services that are there. Good. Any other comments or questions, perhaps? No, thank you. In which case, as always, or as generally the case, recommendations at section 3, would you kindly just indicate your agreement? Is that agreed? Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. This takes us on to item 14, and this is the bikeability contract, which is with Phil. Phil, once you've introduced it.
Thank you,
Two
Chairman.
speakers, Councillor Beardsworth and Randall. Sorry, over to you.
Sorry. Thank you, Chairman. This report concerns the current bikeability training contract. As we near the conclusion of the existing arrangement that's managed by a third-party provider on the 31st of March, it's crucial to address the impending transition. A thorough tendering process aiming to commence a new contract by the 2nd of September is proposed. This report seeks approval to initiate procurement of a fresh bikeability contract, ensuring programme continuity. Bikeability, that is supported by the Department of Transport, imparts essential safe cycling skills to our future generation, spanning 3 levels from learning to ride through to secondary school age. Bikeability Plus complements this, addressing cycling barriers and reinforcing inclusivity across the West Northamptonshire Council area. The government's investment underscores its commitment to promoting cycling, aligning with the goal of 50% urban journeys being walked or cycled by 2030. However, the absence of bikeability training would pose a tangible risk to youth safety and informed travel choices in WNC area. The Active Travel England grant empowers WNC to procure its contract so we can ensure that programme. The decision sought is to approve securing a new contract for initial period of 7 months, and it's 7 months because that's when we've got funding till, followed by 2 one-year extensions. So when we know whether we've got the funding for beyond 2025, we can extend it further. So that's why it's such a short contract, and is necessary to because of the overall value of the contract and the extensions. So that's why it has to go through the procedure. Happy to present the report and hope that you'll accept the recommendations, Chair.
Thanks, Phil. David, you're signaling. Do you want to make a quick comment before we bring our speakers in?
Yeah, just it will come as no surprise that I'm pleased we've got this report before us. I'm a clear fan of cycling in all forms. No, I think it's fabulous that we're doing this. I'm thinking of digging out my old cycling proficiency badge and adding it to my collection on my lanyard. So no, thank you for bringing it forward. I think it's a positive thing. The freedom and independence that cycling gives young children is fantastic. That first time on your bicycle around the park or whatever, I think we all remember that. So no, thoroughly pleased we've got this going before us.
Jolly good. Thank you, David. Right, on to our speakers, which first of all is Councillor Bidsworth. Sally, over to you.
I will be brief because we're all getting tired, I'm sure. Great news. I'm very much in favour of the bikeability scheme. I see them very often around in Kingsthorpe Village. They do tremendous work and they get children to ride bikes, which is what we want to do to make them fit and healthy. I have one problem though with it. If we've trained people to ride bikes, we've got to have the infrastructure to go alongside it. We've got to have bike lanes. We've got to have places where people can ride safely. And children will not be going to school on their bikes unless we provide that facility. So that's the only downside, but I'm really pleased that we're carrying on with this because it's a wonderful thing for people to do, is to learn to ride a bike, which is something I never have.
You never have? Oh, gosh. David can put that right for you. I'd agree with all your comments, I think, Sally. Let's go to, you're happy with the same thing? Brilliant. Thank you, Wendy.
Can I just say on that, Chair, this morning we had a very useful workshop down at Delapree Abbey. Bob was there, and looking at the local cycling, walking and infrastructure plan for Northampton, where infrastructure for cycling featured significantly. So it is being addressed.
Jolly good. Thank you. Okay. Any other comments at all? on this? Any other queries anybody would like to raise? Phil, that's all from you? Yep, brilliant. In which case.
Nothing to add, Chair.
Jolly good. The recommendations are at section 3, recommending that we agree to procure a new bikeability cycle training contract. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Takes us on to our last report, which is item 15. This is recommissioning of extra care services. Matt's going to introduce this for us shortly. We've then got one speaker actually, Councillor Randall with their own comments and some from Councillor Roberts. So Matt, it's over to you to introduce it.
Thank you, Leader. So extra care accommodation facilities are an important part of our care market, and there are currently 3 extra care settings across West Northamptonshire, and there are plans to bring others over the next 2 or 3 years. So West Northamptonshire Council have a responsibility to commission care and support services within the extra care settings for anybody who has eligible care and support needs. The current 2 contracts are due to expire in March 2024, and they've already been extended. So it is recommended a single framework for care and support within the extra care scheme is commissioned on a 5-year basis with the option to extend by a further 2 12-month periods, given a maximum contract term for 7 years. The forecast expenditure for the 7-year contract is 16.51 million, and this has already been built into the medium-term financial plan. Engagement has been taken place with individuals currently living in within the extra care schemes, ensuring that any service improvements have been identified to inform the service specification. Worthy of note is that the Northamptonshire Integrated Care Board, the ICB, that we refer to from time to time, do not currently fund any packages within the current extra care schemes, and the clause will be added to the contract that will enable them to join the framework during the life of the contract to enable joint commission of future packages where applicable. So it's therefore important that we progress to recommission good quality care and support over the next few months via a competitive process and via a single framework for extra care services. The recommendations are at 3.1, Chair, and I commend them to Cabinet. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Matt. So let's go then, if we may, to Councillor Randall. Wendy, over to you.
I haven't got anything to add, Chair, so I'll just read Emma's comments. This recommissioning has to happen. Doing nothing isn't an option, and streamlining the process is crucial, as is consideration to the expanding costs. But there is nothing in the report around showing that any successful commissioning will look to ensure a living wage provision is given for staff. And whilst there is detail on maximising local employment, there is little or no guarantees from this which doesn't align with the alternative provision strategy. This item needs to happen, but getting the best for the people of the West from this needs more oversight.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Wendy. Anybody else have any other comments, or is there any comment we might make to the comment just made, or just accept it as it is? Matt, did you want to add anything?
Yeah. The living wage point will be incorporated into the contract, and that would already be calculated in, but I can get some more assurance from Stuart or Ashley who wrote the report on that particular point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Anybody else, any comments at all on this one? No, I think otherwise it's pretty straightforward, isn't it? So then the recommendations at section 3, if you would please just indicate your agreement to the recommendations. Is that agreed? Jolly good. Thank you very much. Well, that was our last item. So thank to everybody who came along this evening, the contribution, the reports, the introductions to them, and I think we had a useful debate. Thank you very much indeed. Good night.